As Dominic Viga pocketed thousands in bribes at Senator Wallace's elite fundraiser, no one suspected the Common's true target wasn't money, it was justice. Across town, 8-year-old Emma fought for her life in an underfunded hospital, clutching the same teddy bear Dominic's sister held when she died. Years ago, abandoned by the same healthcare system, the senator had repeatedly voted against improving. What devastating secret connects Dominic to the powerful senator that will transform this revenge con into something far more profound? If this moved you, please comment, like, and subscribe to our channel. The champagne flowed freely as wealthy. Donors wrote checks with the casual indifference of those who never worried about medical bills. Each smile Dominic returned concealed years of grief and rage, each handshake a small victory in his private war. Tonight's take would be his biggest score yet, but for the first time in his career. The money wouldn't be financing his escape, it would be financing his revenge. He slipped another check into his jacket pocket and locked eyes with Senator Wallace across the room. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewelry of Washington's elite. Dominic adjusted his custom tailored Armani suit, a necessary investment for tonight's work, and presented his forged invitation to the security guard. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Senator Wallace's Healthcare Innovation Gala. Dominic nodded with practiced confidence. Thank you. Wonderful turnout. Inside, he accepted a flute of champagne and surveyed the room. Pharmaceutical executives, insurance, lobbyists, and tech billionaires mingled with political staffers and media personalities. The air buzzed with deals being made behind false smiles. He'd studied these people for months, their mannerisms, their companies, their connections. Knowledge was the skeleton key to any successful con. Have we met before? A silver-haired woman in diamonds appraised him. Alexandra Ross, Meridian Healthcare. He lied smoothly, using the name of an executive who declined her RSVP. We briefly met at the Chicago Summit last fall. Of course, she nodded, though her eyes revealed uncertainty. Your work on medical data systems is fascinating. You're too kind. Dominic smiled. Though tonight is about supporting Wallace's vision, indeed, his committee position is crucial for the upcoming vote. An aide clinked a glass, drawing attention to the small stage where Senator James Wallace approached the microphone. At 58, Wallace projected the perfect image of a statesman's silver temples, commanding presence and a smile that never reached his eyes. Distinguished guests, thank you for your generous support tonight. Wallace's baritone filled the room. With your help, we're ensuring American healthcare remains the finest in the world while protecting innovation from bureaucratic overreach. Dominic's jaw tightened as he forced himself to applaud with the crowd. The innovation Wallace protected was price gouging. The bureaucratic overreach was coverage for children like his sister. Like Emma, healthcare is personal to me, Wallace continued. When my mother faced cancer, I saw firsthand the miracles of modern medicine. Every American deserves access to these innovations through the free market, not government mandates. Each word stoked Dominic's rage. Wallace's mother had received treatment in a private Swiss clinic while Lucia withered away in a county hospital. As Wallace concluded to enthusiastic applause, Dominic moved smoothly through the crowd. He approached a red-faced man he recognized as the CEO of Pinnacle Pharmaceuticals. Senator Wallace mentioned your company's breakthrough research. Impressive work, the CEO beamed. We're expecting FDA approval by quarter's end. Wallace has been instrumental in streamlining the process. I'm sure he appreciates your support, Dominic suggested. Absolutely. The CEO lowered his voice. Between us, we've earmarked substantial funding for his PAC. Certain regulations need addressing. Smart investment, Dominic nodded, though I found direct support is sometimes more immediately appreciated. Campaigns have many unofficial expenses. The CEO raised an eyebrow, then nodded with understanding. He discreetly passed Dominic a check. Perhaps you could ensure the senator knows Pinnacle's commitment extends beyond public donations. Consider it done. Dominic pocketed the check. already planning his approach to the insurance lobbyist across the room. For 2 hours, he worked methodically. A sympathetic comment here, a shared concern about overregulation there. Each conversation ended the same way, with checks passed to the trusted fundraiser who promised special access to the Senator Dot. As the evening progressed, Wallace himself approached. Dominic's pulse quickened, but his expression remained placid. I don't believe we formally met, Wallace said, extending his hand. James Wallace. Alexander Mercer. Dominic replied with the evening's second false identity. Horizon Venture Capital. Your healthcare initiatives align perfectly with our investment strategy. Wallace's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Always good. To meet forward-thinking investors. Any specific sector interest you? Pediatric care innovations, Dominic replied, watching Wallace's expression carefully. Children are our future, wouldn't you agree? Something flickered in Wallace's eyes, discomfort, perhaps guilt before his political mask returned. Absolutely. Though regulatory frameworks complicate pediatric investments, some might say those regulations protect vulnerable children. Wallace's smile tightened. Protection must be balanced with progress. Excessive oversight stifles the very innovations that could save lives. Dominic swallowed his disgust. An interesting perspective. I've prepared a contribution to support your work. He handed Wallace an envelope containing a modest, traceable check under his false identity, a necessary cover for his presence. Very generous. My aide can ensure you receive our policy briefings. Perfect. Dominic raised his glass. To healthcare innovation. As Wallace moved to greet other guests, Dominic checked his watch. He'd collected over $300,000 in checks and promises. More than enough. It was time to disappear before anyone connected the dots. He slipped toward the exit, nodding farewell to security. Tomorrow, these powerful people would discover their private donations never reached Wallace. But by then, the money would already be serving a different purpose, one that would have made Lucia smile. St. Catherine's Children's Hospital existed in a different universe from the Fairmont's opulence. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating walls painted in faded pastels, meant to cheer, but now just looking tired. In room 408, the 8-year-old Emma Taylor clutched Mr. Buttons, a well-loved teddy bear missing one eye, as an ivy dripped. Medicine into her thin, when are you coming back? Emma's voice was small, but clear through the phone speaker. Sarah Taylor pressed her cell phone against her ear, trying to hear over the clatter of the diner kitchen. Right after my shift ends, sweetheart. I promise. How's Mr. Buttons holding? He's being super brave, Emma replied. Nurse Elaine gave him a bandage just like mine. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting tears. That's great, honey. Is Nurse Elaine there now? She's fixing my blankets. She says the medicine is working extra hard today. Sarah glanced at the clock. Her break had ended 3 minutes ago. Put her on for a second, okay? There was a rustling sound before Elaine's warm voice came. Through. She's doing okay, Sarah. Vitals are stable. Thank you for staying past your shift again. I don't know how to repay you. Don't mention it. This little lady's my favorite patient. Elaine lowered her voice. Any word from the insurance company? Sarah stepped further into the corner of the break room. They're still reviewing the appeal. The new treatment isn't covered under our plan. But Dr. Matthews says it's her best chance. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry, Sarah. Me too. Sarah wiped at her eyes. I need to get back to my tables. Rich people need their coffee. Could you put Emma back on? Another rustle. Mom, can you bring pancakes tomorrow? Sarah's heart squeezed. Sure thing, Em. The special kind with chocolate chips and whipped cream. Sarah forced cheerfulness into her voice. I love you more than all the stars. Love you more than all the planets. Emma replied, their ritual complete. Sarah ended the call and tucked her phone away, straightening her waitress uniform before heading back to the dinner rush. Another 6 hours to go, and then her night shift at the convenience store would begin. Back in room 418, Emma handed the phone to Elaine. Mom's bringing pancakes tomorrow? That sounds delicious. Elaine smiled, adjusting Emma's blankets. At 52, Elaine Jenkins had been a pediatric nurse for 27 years. She'd seen thousands of children come through these halls, but certain patients lodged in your heart. Emma Taylor was one of them. Can I draw now? Emma asked. Absolutely. Elaine helped position the bed tray and placed Emma's sketchbook and colored pencils within reach. Despite the advanced leukemia, Emma's creative spirit remained undimmed. Her drawings covered the hospital room walls, bright forests, starry skies, and fantastic creatures that existed in her imagination. Emma selected a blue pencil and began to draw. I'm making a picture for Dr. Harrison. It's his birthday tomorrow. Helene smiled. He'll love that. A soft knock interrupted them as Dr. Matthews entered with Mr. Abernathy, the hospital's financial administrator. Elaine recognized the expression on Abernathy's face and felt her stomach sink. Hello, Emma, Dr. Matthews said warmly. That's a beautiful sky you're drawing. It's for Dr. Harrison, Emma explained. Continuing to color, Dr. Matthews nodded to Elaine. Could we speak in the hall for a moment? I'll be right back, Emma, Elaine promised, following the two men outside. Once the door closed, Abernathy wasted no time. The insurance company has made their final determination. They won't cover the CAR T-cell therapy. Elaine's face hardened. That's a death sentence. I know, Dr. Matthews said quietly. I've applied to 3 compassionate care programs, but there are waiting lists. What about the hospital fund? Elaine asked. Abernathy shook his head. It's depleted after the Robinson twins last month. The treatment costs nearly $500,000. So we're just giving up. Elaine's voice rose slightly. We're not giving up. Dr. Matthews insisted. We'll continue the current protocol, and the current protocol isn't working. Elaine interrupted. You know that? Dr. Matthews looked pained. I know, but my hands are tied. Does Sarah know yet? Elaine asked. I'll call her after her shift, Dr. Matthews said. I didn't want to tell her. While she's working. Elaine glanced through the window at Emma, peacefully drawing. This isn't right. That little girl deserves a chance. I agree, Dr. Matthews said. But unless we find $475,000, the CAR T-cell therapy isn't an option. Abernathy checked his watch. I have another meeting. I'm sorry about Emma, truly. As he walked away, Elaine turned to Dr. Matthews. Isn't Senator Wallace on the hospital board? He's hosting that big fundraiser tonight. For his campaign, not the hospital, Dr. Matthews replied bitterly. Besides, Wallace votes against expanded healthcare coverage every chance he gets. Elaine's mouth set in a grim line. Someone needs to remind these politicians what their job actually are. Good luck with that, Dr. Matthews sighed. I need to check on my other patients. Will you stay with Emma until Sarah arrives? Of course. Elaine watched him walk away before returning to Emma's room. Is everything okay? Emma asked, looking up from her drawing. Elaine forced a smile. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Tell me about your picture. As Emma explained the details of her drawing, Elaine sat beside her, one hand gently stroking the child's thin hair. Outside the window, darkness had fallen over the city. Somewhere across town, wealthy donors were writing checks to fund the senators. Career? Here, a child drew pictures for a doctor's birthday, unaware that men in suits had just decided her fate. Dominic worked the room with the precision of a surgeon. Each conversation a careful incision designed to extract maximum value. Years of cons had taught him that the wealthy were easiest to deceive. Their privilege bred a special kind of arrogance that made them believe they were too smart to be fooled. The senator mentioned your generous support, Dominic said, sidling. Up to a tan man with an ostentatious gold watch. Gregory Townsend, isn't it? Coastal Insurance Group? The man beamed. He mentioned me specifically? Your perspectives on healthcare policy reform made quite an impression. Dominic lowered, his voice conspiratorially. Between us, he's planning to introduce amendments to the price transparency regulations next month. Your input was apparently quite valuable. Townsend straightened his tie, preening. Well, we've had several productive discussions about the burden these regulations place on insurers. Indeed, the senator values allies who understand the complexities of implementation. Dominic hesitated deliberately. I'm actually collecting some additional insights for a private briefing. Perhaps you'd like to include a more personal message along with your policy recommendations. The executive understood immediately. Of course. He withdrew his checkbook. Who should I make this out to? The Victory Fund is best. It allows for more discretionary allocations. Dominic watched as Townsend wrote a check for $25,000. Please, ensure Senator Wallace knows Coastal is committed to long-term partnership on these regulatory matters. Townsend said, handing over the check. Absolutely. He'll be in touch personally next week. Dominic tucked the check into his inside pocket alongside the others. Another fish landed. He excused himself and drifted toward a group of pharmaceutical representatives, catching fragments of their conversation. Dot, dot, dot. Pricing committee is meeting next Tuesday. Dot, dot, dot. Double quotes, dot, 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 dot. Wallace has been reliable on patent protections. Dot, dot, dot. These patient advocacy groups don't understand market realities. Dot, dot. Dominic's stomach turned. Market realities. He'd heard similar phrases from hospital administrators as his family begged for treatments the insurance wouldn't cover. Market realities had killed Lucia. He composed himself and approached the group with a winning smile. Gentlemen, I couldn't help overhearing your discussion on patent protections. The senator was just mentioning the importance of that very issue. Within minutes, he'd collected 2 more checks and promises of industry data that would help shape upcoming legislation. Every dollar felt like reclaiming something stolen from Lucia. Across the room, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper pantsuit observed him. Dominic recognized her as Wallace's chief of staff, Diane Mercer. He'd researched her extensively. Yale Law, former pharmaceutical lobbyist, known for her ruthless efficiency. She was now moving purposefully in his direction. Dominic smoothly intercepted a waiter, grabbed a fresh champagne flute, and turned away, making a show of checking his phone as he moved toward another group. He needed to avoid direct interaction with Wallace's inner circle. Too late. She stepped directly into his path. I don't believe we've met. Diane Mercer, Senator Wallace's chief of staff. Her handshake was firm, her gaze assessing. Alexander Thorne, Meridian Ventures. Dominic offered his third false identity of the evening, designed for exactly this contingency. Pleasure to meet you, Meridian Ventures. She tilted her head. I'm not familiar with your firm. We're relatively new to Washington, primarily focused on healthcare technology investments in the Midwest. Interesting. And who extended tonight's invitation? A challenge, delivered with a smile. Dominic didn't hesitate. David Cohen from the Biotechnology Association. We met at their conference last month. Mercer's eyes narrowed slightly. Dominic maintained eye contact, his expression open and untroubled. The key to any successful lie was absolute conviction. Of course, she finally said. David mentioned several new members. How are you finding the event? Inspiring. The senator's vision for healthcare aligns perfectly with our investment philosophy. Mercer nodded, still studying him. The senator would love to hear more about your Midwest initiatives. Perhaps you could stop by our offices next week. A trap. I'd be honored. Unfortunately, I'm flying to Chicago tomorrow. Perhaps when I'm next in Washington? Of course. Here's my card. She handed him a heavy cardstock business card. Call my office directly to arrange a meeting. I certainly will. Dominic pocketed the card. If you'll excuse me, I promise to speak with Congressman Ellison before the evening ends. Mercer nodded and let him pass, but Dominic felt her eyes tracking him. His time was running short. As he navigated toward the exit, he overheard Wallace speaking with a gray-haired man in an expensive suit. The committee vote is next Thursday, Wallace was saying quietly. We need to bury this expanded children's coverage provision. The cost projections alone should scare off the moderates. And if that doesn't work, the man asked, then we attach. Poison pill amendments until it's unrecognizable. The usual playbook, Wallace chuckled. Besides, my healthcare innovation initiative makes for better headlines than government expansion. Speaking of which, Bradford Pharmaceuticals is prepared to announce a substantial grant to the initiative. Very publicity friendly. Excellent. Have them coordinate with my office for maximum media coverage. Dominic's hand tightened around his. Champagne flute. The Healthcare Innovation Initiative was Wallace's nonprofit that funneled industry money into positive press events while accomplishing nothing for actual patients. He'd heard enough. Checking his watch, Dominic noted he'd been at the fundraiser for nearly 3 hours, long enough to be remembered, but not so long as to invite detailed scrutiny. He'd collected over $400,000 in checks and pledges, far exceeding his target got as. He neared the exit. A security guard approached him. Sir, could I see your invitation again? Dominic's pulse quickened, but his expression remained calm. Certainly. He reached into his pocket and handed over the forged invitation. The guard examined it closely. There seems to be an issue with the validation code. Really? Dominic frowned with convincing concern. The senator's office sent it directly. Perhaps there was a printing error? The guard hesitated, clearly reluctant to challenge someone who might be a valuable donor. I'll need to verify this with the coordinator. Of course. Dominic nodded understandingly, then glanced at his watch. Actually, I was just leaving early flight tomorrow. But please let the coordinator know about the error. Wouldn't want anyone else to have the same issue. The guard looked relieved. At the easy resolution. Yes, sir. Thank you for your understanding. Not at all. Dominic smiled and walked out into the cool night air, the stolen checks secure in his jacket pocket. Phase 1 complete. The hotel room door clicked shut behind Dominic. He loosened his tie and removed the voice recorder hidden in his jacket, placing it beside the pile of checks on the desk. Tonight's haul would fund a lot of medical care. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and moved to the window. 15 floors below, Washington's monuments glowed in the darkness. A city built on power and promises, most of them broken. The whiskey burned his throat as memories surfaced, unwelcome but inevitable on nights like this. Higher, Dom. Push me higher. 11-year-old Dominic pushed the swing with all his might, sending his 7-year-old sister soaring toward the blue summer sky. Lucia's laughter rang out across the playground, her dark curls streaming behind her like a banner. I'm flying, she squealed. I'm touching the clouds. Don't fall off, Luz, their mother called from the bench where she sat with her nursing. Textbooks. Elena Vigo worked as a hospital aide and studied nights, determined to become an RN despite the exhaustion that lined her young face. Dominic gave the swing another push. He loved making Lucia laugh, loved being her big brother, and protector. When their father had walked out 2 years earlier, Dominic had promised himself he'd always take care of his mother and sister. That night, Lucia complained of feeling tired. The next morning, mysterious bruises appeared on her arms. By afternoon, Elena had taken her to the doctor. By evening, they heard the word that would reshape their lives: leukemia. The months that followed blurred into an endless cycle of hospital visits, insurance calls, and mounting bills. Elena took additional shifts, exhaustion hollowing her cheeks. Dominic learned to cook simple meals, to help Lucia with her homework between treatments, to decipher medical terminology no child should know. Your sister's responding well, Dr. Mitchell told them 4 months into treatment. But we're concerned about her platelet counts. I'd like to try a more aggressive approach. Will our insurance cover it? Elena asked, a question that always. Follow medical recommendations. Dr. Mitchell's hesitation told them everything. I'll speak with the hospital's financial department. Later that night, Dominic found his mother at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and insurance paperwork, silently crying. We'll figure it out, Mom, he said, trying to sound grown up. I can get a paper route or mow lawns. Elena pulled him into a hug, her tears dampening his hair. Oh, mio. You're already doing so much. The aggressive treatment was approved after. Elena spent hours on the phone with insurance representatives, pleading their case. For a while, it seemed to work. Lucia's energy returned. Her hair began to grow back wispy at first, then stronger. She returned to school part-time. Then came the relapse. Harsher than the first, it struck with devastating speed. One day, Lucia was helping Dominic build a model rocket. The next, she was back in the hospital, pale and frightened. We have options, Dr. Mitchell explained, but they're experimental. The insurance company considers them unproven. What does that mean? Dominic asked. It means they won't pay, Elena said, her voice hollow. But they have to, Dominic protested. Lucia needs it. Dr. Mitchell placed a hand on his shoulder. We're appealing the decision and looking into clinical trials. That night, Dominic sat beside Lucia's hospital bed while their mother spoke with administrators in the hallway. His sister looked tiny against the white sheets, dark circles beneath her eyes. Am I going to die, Dom? She whispered. No way, he said fiercely. I won't let you. Lucia's small hand found his. Promise? I promise. He squeezed her fingers. You're going to get better, and we'll go back to the park. I'll push you even higher on the swings. She smiled, believing him because older brothers kept their promises. The appeals were denied. Elena sold their car, then their small house, moving them into a one-bedroom apartment closer to the hospital. Dominic's grandparents sent what money they could from Mexico. A church fundraiser collected $3,000, a drop in the ocean of what they needed. Elena testified at a state legislative hearing about insurance coverage for experimental treatments. Dominic sat in the audience, watching as a younger James Wallace, then a state representative, questioned his mother. While your situation is certainly sympathetic, Mrs. Vega, Wallace said, his voice smooth with practiced concern. Expanding coverage mandates would raise premiums for everyone. Don't you agree we must balance individual needs against market sustainability? My daughter is dying, Elena replied, her voice breaking. What market is sustainable without humanity? Wallace had looked uncomfortable, then checked his watch. The committee voted 7-4 against the coverage expansion. Wallace led the opposition. 3 weeks later, Lucia developed pneumonia. Her weakened immune system couldn't fight it. Dominic sat beside her bed, reading her favorite stories hour after hour, his voice growing hoarse. You promised, she whispered during a moment of lucidity, her eyes fever bright. I know. And you're going to get better, he insisted, even as the machines beeped warnings and nurses moved with increasing urgency. Elena had stepped out to get coffee when the final crisis came. Dominic was alone with Lucia when she gasped, clutched her teddy bear tighter, and whispered, Don't be sad, Dom. By the time the doctors rushed in, she was gone at the funeral. Dominic stood rigid beside his mother, watching as the small white coffin was lowered into the ground. Elena had aged years and months. That night, he found her sobbing over the kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills and a final insurance denial letter. 2 weeks later, they received the bankruptcy paperwork, standing at Lucia's grave after everyone else had left. 16-year-old Dominic made a new promise. The system that let you die, Luz, I'm going to make them pay. Somehow, someday, I'll make them pay. In the hotel room, Dominic drained his whiskey glass. 15 years had passed since that graveside vow. 15 years of building a new identity, of learning the arts of deception and manipulation, of targeting those who profited from others' suffering. Until now, his cons had been about survival and escape, taking enough to disappear, to become someone new. But tonight was different. Tonight was for Lucia. He picked up a framed photo from his suitcase, a dark-haired girl on a swing, laughing at the camera. She would have been 22 now, maybe in medical school like she'd always wanted. Soon, Luz, he whispered to the photograph. Soon they'll know what it costs. Morning light filtered through the windows of St. Catherine's Children's Hospital. As Dominic approached the reception desk, he traded his tailored suit for jeans and a button-down shirt, just another visitor carrying a small gift bag. I'm here to see Emma Taylor, he told the receptionist. Room 480. Are you family? The woman asked, glancing up from her computer. A friend of the family, Dominic replied, with the easy confidence that had opened countless doors. Her mother asked me to stop by while she's at work. The receptionist nodded. Fourth floor, east wing. Visiting hours end at 8. As he rode the elevator, Dominic questioned his own motives. This wasn't part of the plan? He should be at the airport already, disappearing as he'd done dozens of times before. Instead, he was drawn here by a need he couldn't fully articulate to. See the face of someone who might benefit from what he'd done, or perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps he just needed to see her, this child who reminded him so much of Lucia Dot. He found room 480 easily. The door was partially open, and he could hear a child's voice inside. Mr. Button says the blue sky is happier than the purple one, but I think the purple has more possibilities. Dominic knocked gently on the doorframe. Come in, called a small voice. Emma Taylor sat propped up in bed, surrounded by colored pencils and drawing paper. And 4-line ran to her arm, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside her. Despite the clinical setting, she'd clearly made the space her own. Drawings covered the walls, bright landscapes, elaborate space scenes, and imaginative creatures that existed nowhere on Earth. Hi, Dominic said, suddenly uncertain. I'm a friend. Is your mom here? Emma studied him curiously. Mom's at work. Are you a doctor? No, just a visitor. My name's Dominic. He held up the gift bag. I brought something for you. Emma's face brightened. A present? Nothing fancy? Just some art supplies. I heard you like to draw. I love drawing, Emma beamed. How did you? No? Dominic gestured to the artwork decorating the walls. Just a guess. He approached the bed and handed her the bag. Inside were professional-grade colored pencils, a sketchbook, and a small stuffed penguin. Emma's eyes widened as she pulled. Out the pencils. These are the fancy kind. The ones in the metal box. They should last longer than the regular ones, Dominic said, surprised by the warmth spreading through his chest at her reaction. Emma hugged the penguin. I'm going to name him Wells. He can be friends with Mr. Buttons. She indicated the well-worn teddy bear beside her pillow. The sight of the teddy bear sent a jolt through Dominic. It was so similar to Lucia's, the same worn fur, the same missing eye. He must have visibly reacted because Emma tilted her head. Are you okay? Dominic composed himself. Yes, sorry. Your bear just reminds me of one my sister had. Is your sister my age? Emma asked, arranging the penguin next to the bear. She would be much older now. She got sick when she was about your age. Did she get better? The directness of children. No, she didn't. Emma's face grew solemn. I'm sorry. Was she sick like me? Yes, very similar. Emma nodded with the gravity of someone who understood more than she should need to. That's why you brought me presents. I guess it is, Dominic admitted, surprised by his own honesty. I'm going to get better, Emma said with quiet certainty. The doctors are trying a new medicine. Dominic remembered what he'd overheard about the insurance denial. That's good. New medicines can do amazing things. Mom says it's expensive, but Dr. Matthews is working on it. Emma picked up one of the new pencils. Want to see what I'm drawing? I'd love to. She showed him an elaborate underwater scene with mermaids, fish, and a castle. This is where I go in my dreams sometimes. There's no being sick there. It's beautiful, Dominic said, meaning it. You're very talented. Thank you. Emma selected a purple pencil. Do you want to draw too? I have extra paper. Dominic hadn't drawn since high school art class, but he found himself pulling up a chair. Sure, but I'm not very good. That's okay. Drawing is about having fun, not being good. She handed him a sheet of paper. You can draw whatever makes you happy. For 20 minutes, they sat together drawing. Emma chatted about her favorite animals, her school friends who visited sometimes, and the kind nurse named Elaine who brought her pudding cups. Dominic found himself relaxing, drawn into her world of imagination and resilience. Emma, honey, I brought your... A woman stopped in the doorway. surprise crossing her tired face. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know Emma had a visitor. Dominic stood quickly. You must be Sarah. I'm Dominic. I was just dot dot dot. He brought me art supplies, Mom. Emma held up the metal box of pencils and waddles. She proudly displayed the penguin. Sarah Taylor approached cautiously. She wore a waitress uniform, dark circles under her eyes suggesting long shifts and little sleep. That's very kind, but how do you know my daughter? He knows someone who is sick like me, Emma explained before Dominic could answer. His sister, understanding softened Sarah's expression. I see. Are you with one of the support groups? Dominic seized the explanation. Yes, I volunteer sometimes. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. Of course. Sarah set down a paper bag. I brought your favorite sandwich, turkey and cheese. Emma asked eagerly, with the crust cut off just how you like it. While Emma investigated the sandwich, Sarah drew Dominic aside. Thank you for the gifts. It's been a rough week. I heard there might be issues with treatment approval, Dominic said carefully. Sarah's face fell. The insurance won't cover the new therapy she needs. We're looking at options, but she trailed off, the weight of the situation evident in her slumped shoulders. I'm sorry, Dominic said, the words painfully inadequate. Is there anything I can do? Sarah gave him a tired smile. Just visiting means a lot. Emma doesn't get many visitors besides the staff. I should let you two have lunch, Dominic said, gathering his coat. It was nice meeting you both. Will you come back? Emma asked around a bite of sandwich. You didn't finish your drawing. Dominic hesitated. I'll try. As he turned to leave, he noticed a framed photograph on Emma's nightstand. It showed a younger, happier Sarah with her arm around a small toddler version of Emma. The father was cropped from the image. But a male hand remained visible on Sarah's shoulder. In the hallway. Dominic nearly collided with a doctor checking a chart. Excuse me, the doctor said, looking up. His name badge read Dr. Matthews, Oncology. My fault, Dominic replied. Actually, I was hoping to make a donation to the children's ward. Who would I speak with about that? Dr. Matthews looked surprised, then pointed down the hall. Hospital administration, 3rd floor. Ask for Mr. Abernathy. Thank you. As Dominic walked away, he heard Dr. Matthews enter Emma's room, his voice warm. With forced optimism, how's my favorite artist today? On the 3rd floor, Dominic discovered another piece of the puzzle. A donor wall listed the hospital's major benefactors, and there, under Platinum Supporters, was Senator James Wallace's name. Further investigation in the administrative waiting room revealed a framed photograph of the hospital board of directors. Wallace stood in the center, his $1 million smile beaming as he cut a ribbon at a new wing opening. May I help you? A receptionist approached. I was interested in making a donation, Dominic said, still studying the photograph. Senator Wallace is on the board? Yes, he's been our chairman for 6 years, she replied proudly. His healthcare innovation initiative has been very supportive. How? Interesting, Dominic murmured. I'd like to speak with Mr. Abernathy about a contribution to the Children's Oncology Department. I'll see if he's available. As the receptionist walked away, Dominic continued examining the photograph, a plan forming in his mind. Wallace, who voted against expanded coverage while chairing a children's hospital board. Wallace, who raised millions for his campaigns while children like Emma were denied life-saving treatments. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. And soon, it would be expensive. Back in his hotel room, Dominic spread the checks across the bed. $417,000. More than enough to fund Emma's treatment, with plenty left over. He arranged the checks in neat stacks, photographing each one as evidence. His usual routine after a con was simple. Disappear, establish a new identity, and start over somewhere far away. The money would fund his escape and comfortable anonymity until the next job. That had been the plan last night, but Emma's face had changed something. The way she'd named her penguin without hesitation, the drawings on her hospital walls. The teddy bear, so like Lucia's, Dominic opened his laptop and began researching. First, Senator Wallace's voting record on health care legislation. 27 votes against expanded coverage for children. 18 votes against lowering prescription drug costs. 12 votes supporting market-based solutions that protected insurance companies from regulation. Next, Wallace's campaign finances. Pharmaceutical companies had contributed $3.2 million to his last campaign. Insurance industry, $2.7 million. Medical device manufacturers, another $1 million. Finally, Wallace's Healthcare Innovation Initiative. The nonprofit's financial disclosures revealed minimal actual charitable work. Less than 15% of funds went to patient care. The rest disappeared into administrative costs and awareness campaigns that primarily featured Wallace himself. Dominic sat back, disgust rising in his throat. The initiative was a perfect vehicle for industry money to flow to Wallace outside campaign finance restrictions, all while providing a veneer of compassion. He thought of Sarah Taylor's exhausted eyes, working double shifts while her daughter fought for her life. He thought of his own mother, bankrupted by medical bills, working herself to illness trying to save Lucia. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Senator Wallace announces Healthcare Innovation Summit. The accompanying photo showed Wallace smiling with pharmaceutical executives, champagne glasses raised in a toast. Dominic's decision crystallized in that moment. This wouldn't be like his other cons. He wouldn't just take the money and run. This time, he would make it count. He pulled up the website for St. Catherine's Children's Hospital and found their donation page. The process would need to be anonymous, but traceable enough to ensure the funds reached their intended purpose. He couldn't use the checks directly. They were made out to Wallace's campaign entities. He'd need to cash them first, which would require additional steps. Dominic began drafting a plan. First, establish a legitimate-seeming foundation as a vehicle for the donation. Next, create documentation for the foundation that would withstand basic scrutiny. Then, structure the donations specifically for pediatric cancer treatments with a particular focus on T-cell therapy. The hospital would question a sudden, anonymous donation of this magnitude. He needed a backstory that would satisfy their curiosity without revealing his identity or the source of the funds. He thought of Emma's hopeful eyes as she'd said, "I'm going to get better." The absolute conviction in her voice, that same certainty, had been in Lucia's eyes when he promised she would recover. He'd failed Lucia. He wouldn't fail Emma. For hours, Dominic worked meticulously, creating the framework for the Second Chance Foundation, a fictional charitable organization dedicated to funding experimental treatments for children with cancer. He drafted persuasive documentation, created a simple website that appeared legitimate, and established temporary contact information that would redirect to burner phones. As dawn broke over the city. He finalized his plan. The foundation would make an anonymous donation to St. Catherine's for its specific directives for its use. The money would fund Emma's treatment and similar cases. With restrictions preventing administrative diversion. There was significant risk. If Wallace or his staff connected the missing checks to the Sutton Hospital donation, they might investigate further. If the hospital became suspicious about the foundation's provenance, they might reject the funds. If authorities traced the money back to him, he'd face serious charges. But for once, the risk felt worth it. Dominic gathered the checks and prepared for the next phase. He'd need to move quickly. By now, Wallace's team would be discovering that their trusted fundraiser, Alexander Mercer, didn't exist. They'd be calling donors, confirming the missing checks. He had perhaps 48 hours before a serious investigation began. He looked once more at Lucia's photo before carefully packing it away. "I think you'd approve, Liz," he whispered. "It's not exactly what I promised at your grave, but maybe it's better." As he prepared to leave the hotel, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Enjoyed meeting you yesterday. Emma's asking when you'll visit again. Sarah Taylor." Dominic stared at the message, a complication he hadn't anticipated. Normal procedure would be to ignore it, to sever all connections. Instead, his fingers typed a reply. I'll try to stop. By tomorrow afternoon. He hesitated before pressing send, recognizing the danger in maintaining contact. Then he thought of Emma's unfinished drawing. Her insistence that he return to complete it. He pressed send, then switched off the phone. Sometimes the heart made decisions the mind knew were unwise. Dominic checked out of the hotel, paid cash for a room across town under a different name, and began the careful process of converting the stolen checks into a donation that would save a child's life. For the first time since Lucia died, the gnawing emptiness inside him felt slightly less vast. Taking from the corrupt to help the innocent, perhaps this was what his skills had been meant for all along. That night, he dreamed. Oh, F. Lucia. Not as she'd been in her final days, thin and pale against hospital sheets, but as she'd been before, laughing on the swings, soaring toward the clouds, her voice carrying on the summer breeze. Higher, Dom. Push me higher. Harold Abernathy had been St. Catherine's financial administrator for 17 years. In that time, he developed a finely tuned sense for the hospital's fiscal realities, chief among them being that miracles were rare, especially financial ones, which made the email in his inbox all the more perplexing. Mr. Abernathy, it began, the Second Chance Foundation wishes to make a restricted donation of $475,000 specifically for pediatric oncology CAR T-cell treatments. We request that Emma Taylor, room 418, be the first recipient. Additional funds may follow depending on outcome reporting. Please confirm receipt and acceptance. Abernathy adjusted his glasses and read the email again. The Second Chance Foundation? He'd never heard of it. A quick internet search showed a sleek but sparse website recently created, he noted, describing a private foundation dedicated to funding experimental treatments for children with terminal illnesses. Suspicious. He forwarded the email to the hospital's legal department, requesting verification. Then he called Dr. Matthews. A foundation wants to fund Emma Taylor's CAR T-cell therapy, he explained. Have you heard of the Second Chance Foundation? No, Matthews replied, surprise evident in his voice. But if they're offering to fund Emma's treatment, I'm not asking questions. We need to be cautious. This could be some kind of scam. Harold, that little girl is running out of time. If there's any chance this is legitimate, I've asked legal to verify. Abernathy interrupted. They'll expedite it. 3 hours later, the hospital's legal counsel called. The foundation appears legitimate based on our preliminary review. They've arranged for funds transferred to our restricted accounts. The paperwork is in order. That's unusual, Abernathy muttered. Unusual, but apparently genuine. They've requested anonymity, but provided all necessary documentations. Abernathy hung up, still puzzled. Anonymous donors weren't uncommon, but the specificity of this one targeting a particular patient and treatment was odd. Still, the money was real, and that was what mattered. He picked up his phone and dialed Dr. Matthews. The funding's been approved. You can proceed with Emma Taylor's treatment. Dr. Matthews found Sarah in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of coffee between shifts. Her uniform was wrinkled, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She looked up as he approached, immediately tensing. Is it Emma? Has something. Emma's fine. He assured her quickly. In fact, I have good news. Sarah straightened, hope and wariness battling in her expression. What kind of good news? The hospital has received a donation specifically for CAR T-cell therapy. Emma qualifies as the first recipient. Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. I don't understand. The insurance denied it. You said it costs nearly $500,000. It does. The donation covers it completely. Who would donate that kind of money for my daughter? Dr. Matthews sat across from her. It's an anonymous foundation. They've specifically designated Emma for treatment. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. This doesn't happen. Not to people like us. Apparently it does, Dr. Matthews smiled. We can begin treatment preparations tomorrow. Sarah pressed her hands to her mouth, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I have been praying for a miracle. Well, Dr. Matthews said gently. It seemed someone was listening. When Sarah entered Emma's room, her daughter was drawing with the new colored pencils. Mr. Buttons and Waddles arranged as an audience for her artwork. Hey, sweetheart, Sarah said, working to keep her voice steady. How are you feeling? Good. I'm drawing Dr. Harrison as a superhero. See his stethoscope cape. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, taking Emma's small hand in hers. The doctors have some exciting news. They're going to try that special medicine we talked about. Emma's eyes widened. The one that Dr. Matthews said would make the bad cells go away? That's the one, but I thought it was too expensive. Sarah smoothed Emma's hair, marveling at her child's understanding of adult concerns. Someone very kind has paid for it. Who? We don't know. They want to stay anonymous, that means secret. Emma considered this, like a superhero. They help people, but keep their identity secret. Sarah smiled through her tears. Exactly like that. Maybe it was Dominic, Emma suggested. He seemed really nice. And he knew about being sick like me. Sarah thought of the man who'd visited yesterday with art supplies. Could he possibly? No, that was absurd. Where would a young man like that get $500,000? I think it was probably a big foundation with lots of money to help kids, Sarah explained. But we can thank Dominic for the nice gifts. When he visits again, Emma nodded, returning to her drawing. I'm going to make a thank you card for the secret superhero, even if we don't know who they are. Across town, Elaine Jenkins finished her nursing shift and headed to the administrative offices. She'd overheard whispers about Emma's miraculous funding and wanted to confirm it. Herself, Harold Abernathy was still at his desk, reviewing paperwork. Is it true? Elaine asked without preamble. About Emma Taylor's treatment, Abernathy looked up. Yes, full funding arrived this morning. From where? A foundation. They've requested anonymity. Elaine narrowed her eyes. That's unusual. That's what I said. Abernathy shuffled papers. But their money is real enough. We've confirmed the transfer. It's just strange timing. Yesterday, Emma had a visitor, a young man she'd never met before. Brought her art supplies. Abernathy shrugged. Probably just a coincidence. Maybe. Elaine wasn't convinced. What's the foundation called? The Second Chance Foundation. Never heard of them before today. Elaine nodded thoughtfully. Well, whatever the source, it's a blessing for that family. As she walked to her car, Elaine remembered the look on the young man's face when he'd seen Emma's teddy bear recognition. Pain. Something deeply personal. And now, suddenly, anonymous funding appeared. She made a mental note to be present when this Dominic visited again Dot in his new hotel room. Dominic tracked the money transfer online. The donation had been accepted. The funds allocated specifically as directed. Phase 2 complete. He should leave now. The smart play would be to vanish, to put as much distance as possible between himself and Washington before Wallace's people connected the dots. But there was Emma's drawing to finish, and a promise to return. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Don't know if you've heard, but Emma qualified for the treatment. It's a miracle. She's asking when you'll visit again. Dominic stared at the message. He typed, deleted, and retyped his response several times before settling on. That's wonderful news. I'll stop by tomorrow afternoon. Another mistake. Another risk. But he couldn't leave without seeing the results of his work. Without seeing hope replace fear in a child's eyes. Just one more visit, he told himself. Then he'd disappear. His burner phone rang. The line connected to the fictional foundation. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. Harold Abernathy from St. Catharines, expressing gratitude and requesting a meeting with foundation representatives to discuss the donation and potential future collaborations. Dominic deleted the message. There would be no meeting, no future collaborations. By this time tomorrow, the Second Chance Foundation would effectively cease to exist. Its purpose fulfilled. He turned on the television to distract himself and was confronted with Senator Wallace's face. The caption read, Senator Wallace announces, Healthcare Innovation Summit. We're bringing together the brightest minds in healthcare to develop market-driven solutions, Wallace was saying, his practiced sincerity as smooth as ever. The American people deserve innovation, not government takeovers. Dominic changed the channel, anger churning in his stomach. The same hollow promises, the same self-serving agenda. For a moment, he questioned whether his plan went far enough. Taking Wallace's donated money and redirecting it to actually help a sick child was satisfying. But was it justice? Maybe there was more to be done. Maybe this was just the beginning. He opened his laptop and began researching Senator Wallace more deeply. Not just his voting record or campaign finances, but his personal history, his family, his vulnerabilities. If Wallace had skeletons in his closet, and men like him always did, perhaps they deserved to see the light of day. Senator James Wallace's morning routine was sacrosanct: a 5-mile run, a protein shake, and 30 minutes to review the day's agenda before his staff arrived. This discipline had carried him through 3 Senate terms and positioned him for a potential presidential run. Today, that routine was shattered by Diane Mercer's early arrival, her face tight with concern. "We have a situation," she said without preamble, setting a folder on his desk. Wallace paused mid-sip of his shake. "Define situation?" "Several major donors are claiming they gave checks to someone at the fundraiser checks that never reached us." Wallace set down his glass. "How many? How much?" 17 confirmed so far, over 400,000. Christ. Wallace opened the folder, scanning the list of names and amounts. Townsend, Barani, Kellerman, these are crucial relationships. What the hell happened? Someone posed as a fundraiser, called himself Alexander Mercer or Alexander Thorne, depending on who he talked to. Diane's voice was clipped with anger at the security breach. Collected checks, promised access and influence. How did he get into the event? Forged invitation. Professional quality. Wallace leaned back, mind racing through implications. Contact everyone on this list. Apologize profusely. Schedule personal meetings for me with the largest donors. Replace their contributions from my personal accounts if necessary. Already arranging it, Diane hesitated. There's more. Bradford Pharmaceuticals is threatening to withdraw support for the Healthcare Innovation Initiative. They're questioning our competence. Wallace's jaw tightened. Damage control. Now I want Capitol Police and the FBI investigating. Frame it as an attack on the democratic process. And get me Bradford on the phone. As Diane left, Wallace considered the broader implications. A security breach was embarrassing but manageable. The financial loss was significant but not crippling. The real danger lay in perception, any suggestion that his operation wasn't. Tightly controlled, could spook donors and embolden opponents. He picked up his phone and dialed his campaign manager. "Jack, we need a diversion. Schedule a press conference on the healthcare bill. I'll announce the amendment package early." Detective Marcus Reed of the Capitol Police Financial Crimes Unit studied the security footage from the Fairmont Hotel. The suspect moved with confidence. "Working the room like someone who belonged there? Can you enhance the image?" he asked. "The technician? That's as good as it gets. Hotel security cameras aren't high definition." Reed frowned at the grainy image. The man was careful, never looking directly at cameras, keeping his face partially turned away. Professional behavior. Run facial recognition anyway. And get me the guest list and staff roster. His phone rang. The FBI liaison. "We found something interesting. Those checks were cashed through 3 different banks using forged business accounts. But here's the twist. The money was then wired to St. Catherine Children's Hospital as a restricted donation." Reed straightened. The thief donated the money? Specifically for pediatric cancer treatments. Anonymous, but designated for particular usage. That single quote says unusual. There's more. The donation was made in the name of a foundation that barely exists website created 3 days ago. Paperwork filed expeditiously, but with minimal details. Reed rubbed his chin. "So this isn't about personal gain?" It's some kind of political statement against Wallace. Looks that way. We're investigating the hospital angle. See if there's any connection to Wallace there. After hanging up, Reed returned to the security footage. This wasn't a typical con man. The level of planning, the specific target, the redirection of funds to a children's hospital, it suggested a personal vendetta, executed with precision. Sarah couldn't take time off work. They needed every dollar. Miracle treatment or not, but she called every hour for updates as Emma began pre-treatment. Testing. Her blood work looks good. Dr. Matthews assured her during an afternoon call. We'll harvest T cells tomorrow and begin the modification process. And the success rate? Sarah asked for the 10th time. For her specific condition, about 60% show significant improvement. Many achieve complete remission. After the call, Sarah returned to her tables at the diner, moving mechanically through her duties while her mind remained at the hospital. The possibility of Emma recovering seemed too precious to fully believe. During her break, she checked her phone and found a text from Dominic confirming his visit that afternoon. She felt an inexplicable sense of gratitude toward this stranger who had appeared in their lives. Just before the miracle funding, Elaine was updating Emma's charts when the news bulletin caught her attention on the break room television. Senator James Wallace has called for an investigation into what he terms a targeted attack at a recent fundraiser. The anchor reported, according to sources, an imposter collected unauthorized donations potentially exceeding $500,000. Elaine froze, mental connections forming. The timing, the amount, the mysterious foundation, ... The FBI and Capitol Police are investigating, the report continued. Senator Wallace assures donors that any misappropriated funds will be replaced. And security protocols strengthened. The screen showed Wallace at a podium, his expression grave as he denounced the democratic institutions. Behind him stood hospital board members and pharmaceutical executives. A show of solidarity for the Healthcare Innovation Initiative. Elaine turned off the television, thoughts racing. Could there possibly be a connection between the theft from Wallace's fundraiser and Emma's sudden anonymous benefactor? If so, the young man who'd visited Emma might be more than just a compassionate stranger. Vans gathered outside Wallace's office as he prepared for his press conference. His team had pivoted quickly, recasting the theft as an opportunity to showcase his leadership on healthcare reform. We'll announce the amendment package, his communications director explained. Frame it as protecting innovation while expanding accessibility. The press will focus on policy rather than the fundraiser incident. Wallace nodded, reviewing talking points. Any progress identifying the thief? Capitol Police have images, but nothing conclusive. They're interviewing hotel staff and attendees. Increase the pressure. I want this resolved quickly and quietly. As staff made final preparations, Wallace's private line rang the hospital board chairman. James, have you heard about the anonymous donation to St. Catherine's? I've been dealing with this fundraiser situation, Wallace replied impatiently. What donation? Nearly $500,000 for pure T-cell therapy. Came in yesterday from a foundation no one's heard of. Wallace froze, the timing immediately suspicious. $500,000, you say? Yes. Specified for pediatric cancer patients, starting with a girl named Emma Taylor. Emma Taylor, Wallace repeated, the name triggering something in his memory. Send me everything you have on this donation and the patient. After hanging up, Wallace sat motionless, possibilities unfolding in his mind. The stolen money redirected to a hospital where he served as board chairman. A specific patient named. This wasn't random, it was targeted, personal. But why Emma Taylor? The name nagged at him, familiar yet elusive. His assistant interrupted his thoughts. Senator, they're ready for you. Wallace nodded, pushing the matter aside temporarily. He'd address the press, control the narrative, then investigate this connection privately. If someone was attempting to send him a message, he needed to understand it before it escalated. Dominic watched Wallace's press conference. From his hotel room, studying the senator's composed exterior for cracks. There were none visible. Wallace was too practiced, too disciplined to show weakness publicly. His phone buzzed with alerts from dummy email accounts he'd established for the foundation. Hospital administrators, grateful but curious. Charity. Watchdog organizations requesting information. A reporter investigating anonymous medical benefactors. He ignored them all. The foundation had served its purpose. His focus returned to the television, where Wallace was now discussing healthcare policy. The American people deserve innovation, not bureaucracy. Our amendment package ensures cutting-edge treatments remain accessible to all. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Dominic switched off the TV and checked the time. He'd promised to visit Emma that afternoon. One last visit, he reminded himself. One glimpse of the good his actions had accomplished. Then he would disappear, as he always did. But as he gathered his coat, he wondered if disappearing would be enough this time. The stolen money had helped one child, but Wallace remained untouched, his power and influence intact. Perhaps there was more to be done. Perhaps Emma was just the beginning. On the nightstand lay the results of his research into Wallace's background, family history, business dealings, potential scandals carefully managed and buried. The more Dominic had learned, the more convinced. He became that his instincts were right. Wallace was hiding something significant. Something that, if exposed, could cause far more damage than a mere financial theft. Dominic tucked the research into his bag. He'd visit Emma, see her hopeful face, then decide his next move. The game was changing. What had started as simple revenge was evolving into something more complex and potentially more satisfying. Dominic found Emma's hospital room transformed. Medical equipment for the new treatment had arrived, and Emma sat propped up in bed, her face brighter than he'd seen before. Hope was a powerful medicine. "You came back," Emma exclaimed, setting aside her sketchbook. "I promised, didn't I?" Dominic placed a small bag on her bedside table. More art supplies. Watercolors this time. Emma's eyes widened. "I've never tried watercolors before. They're fun, different from colored pencils." Dominic settled into the visitor's chair. "I hear you got some good news about your treatment." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "A secret superhero paid for my special medicine?" "Mom says we don't know who did it, but they must be really nice." Dominic felt warmth spread through his chest. That does sound like a superhero. "Dr. Matthews says they're going to take some of my cells tomorrow and make them super strong, then put them back in me. To fight the bad cells." Emma demonstrated with punching motions. "Like training an army." "That's exactly right." Dominic smiled. "Very smart explanation." Emma retrieved her sketchbook. "I finished my drawing, but I saved a page for yours. You promised to finish it. Remember?" "I did, didn't I?" Dominic accepted the sketchbook and pencils. "What should I draw?" "Whatever makes you happy," Emma replied. Echoing her words from their previous visit, Dominic began sketching a park with a swing set. It had been Lucia's favorite place. "That's pretty," Emma observed. "Is that where you went with your sister?" Dominic nodded, surprised by her perception. "Yes, before she got sick." "What was her name?" "Lucia." "We called her Luz." "That's pretty. What does it mean?" "Light," Dominic answered, softly. "It means light." They drew in companionable silence for a while, Emma occasionally asking questions. About Lucia and Dominic answering more honestly than he had with anyone in years. "My dad left when I got sick," Emma said, suddenly, her pencil pausing. "Mom says he couldn't handle it, but I think he was scared." Dominic kept his expression neutral. "That must have been hard. Sometimes I see him on TV, but he doesn't know." "I watch." Emma returned to her drawing, her voice matter of fact. "Mom keeps his picture in the drawer, but I have a copy." She reached under her pillow and pulled out a folded photograph, offering it to Dominic. "That's him with Mom when they were younger." Dominic accepted the photo, expecting to see an ordinary man who'd made the despicable choice to abandon his family in crisis. Instead, he found himself staring at Senator James Wallace's younger face. His hand froze, mind racing to process the implications. Wallace was Emma's father. Wallace had abandoned his own child when she became the same. Man who repeatedly voted against healthcare expansions that would help children like her. Mom says they weren't married, Emma continued, unaware of Dominic's shock. She says he had an important career and couldn't be part of our family. Dominic carefully controlled his expression, though his heart hammered against his ribs. You look like him, he managed to say, which was true. Emma had Wallace's distinctive eyes. Mom says that too. Emma took back the photo, folding it carefully. Sometimes I write him letters, but we don't know where to send them. The door opened, and Sarah entered, still in her waitress uniform. She stopped short, seeing Dominic. You came, she said with a tired smile. Emma's been talking about you. All day. I promised to finish my drawing, Dominic replied, his mind still reeling from the revelation. Sarah approached, touching Emma's forehead in a habitual check for fever. The doctors say we can start the new treatment tomorrow. It's still hard to believe. Secret superhero, Emma reminded her mother. I'm making them a thank you card. Sarah noticed the watercolors. More art supplies. You're too generous. It's nothing, Dominic said, studying Sarah's face. Now that he knew, he could see how Wallace had been attracted to her. She had a natural beauty that even exhaustion couldn't dim. Can I speak with you in the hall for a moment? Sarah asked Dominic. Of course. I'll be right back to finish that drawing, he promised Emma in the corridor. Sarah crossed her arms, her expression conflicted. I need to ask you something, and please don't take it the wrong way. Dominic tensed. What is it? This foundation that's paying for Emma's treatment. Do you know anything about it? He kept his face neutral. Why would I? It just seems like such a strange coincidence. You visit one day, and the next morning, this anonymous donation appears. That is a coincidence, Dominic acknowledged. Fortunate one for Emma. Sarah studied him intently. I'm grateful, no matter where it came from. I just need to understand. Dominic chose his words carefully. Sometimes, good things happen without explanation. Maybe just accept the gift for what it is. Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. You're right. I'm sorry for being suspicious. It's just been us against the world for so long. No apology needed. I understand being protective. Dominic hesitated, then added, Emma mentioned her father. Sarah tensed again. She showed you his picture? Dominic nodded. Senator Wallace. That must be complicated. Sarah glanced around the empty hallway nervously. She wasn't supposed to keep that photo. I've tried to shield her from that part of our lives. Does he know about her illness? No. Sarah's voice hardened. He made it very clear 8 years ago that his political career couldn't accommodate an unplanned child. Paid me to go away and sign an NDA, but you kept the child. Of course I kept her. She's the best thing in my life. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I respected the agreement. Never contacted him, never told Emma who he really is. I've protected his precious career at every turn. The bitterness in her voice matched the anger churning in Dominic's stomach. He's never provided support? A one-time payment when I was pregnant. His lawyer made it clear there would be legal consequences if I ever went public. Sarah wiped her eyes. I never wanted his money. I just needed him to acknowledge his daughter. Dominic thought of Wallace chairing the hospital board, while his own daughter fought for her life within its walls. The hypocrisy was staggering. What would you do? He asked carefully. If people found out? Sarah stiffened. I signed a legal agreement. We need the treatment Emma's getting now. I can't risk anything that might jeopardize that. Of course. Dominic nodded, respecting her caution. I shouldn't have asked. It's fine. Just please don't mention any of this to Emma. She thinks her father just couldn't handle her illness. She doesn't know about the agreement or who he really is. I won't say anything, Dominic promised. They returned to Emma's room, where she had prepared watercolor paper and filled a small cup with water. I'm ready to learn watercolors, she announced. Can you show me how they work? For the next hour, Dominic demonstrated basic watercolor techniques, pushing aside his churning thoughts about Wallace. Emma's delight in the new medium was genuine, her focus absolute as she experimented with colors and techniques. As visiting hours ended, Dominic made his goodbyes, promising to return soon. a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, given what. He now knew Dot in the hospital parking lot. He sat in his rental car, mind racing with possibilities. Wallace's abandoned daughter, suffering from cancer he could easily afford to treat, in a hospital where he served as board chairman. The story would destroy him politically if it became public. The question was how to use this information, and what would the consequences be for Emma and Sarah? In his hotel room, Dominic paced like a caged animal, mind churning with what he'd discovered. The revelation of Wallace as Emma's father changed everything. This was no longer just about redirecting stolen funds to a worthy cause. It was about justice, accountability, and a level of hypocrisy that made his blood boil. Wallace had abandoned his own child, refused to support her medical care, and still had the audacity to chair a children's hospital board while voting against healthcare expansions. The same man who spoke passionately about family values had threatened legal action to keep his daughter hidden. Dominic stopped pacing and opened his laptop. His original plan had been simple: steal from Wallace's donors, help Emma disappear. But now he saw a bigger opportunity, chance to truly make Wallace face consequences beyond mere financial loss. He began methodically researching every aspect of Wallace's public persona, particularly his family values platform. The senator frequently invoked his commitment to children's futures. His campaign website featured carefully staged photos with his wife of 30 years and their adult son, a corporate attorney. Nowhere was there any hint of an 8-year-old daughter fighting cancer. Wallace's voting record revealed consistent opposition to policies that would have helped families like Emma's expanded Medicaid coverage, caps on out-of-pocket expenses for childhood cancer treatments, price controls on pharmaceuticals, all while accepting millions from insurance and pharmaceutical lobbies. Next, Dominic examined the non-disclosure agreement Sarah had mentioned. Such agreements typically included severe financial penalties for disclosure, which explained Sarah's fear. Given her economic situation, even the threat of legal action would be devastating. But what if someone else revealed the truth? Someone with no legal connection to the agreement, who couldn't be sued for violating it. Dominic drafted potential approaches, weighing each for impact and potential blowback on Emma and Sarah. Direct public exposure might generate immediate headlines, but would create chaos for the family. Anonymous tips to journalists risked incomplete or inaccurate reporting. A private confrontation with Wallace might lead nowhere if the senator believed he could continue to contain the situation. What he needed was leverage, enough evidence to force Wallace to acknowledge Emma publicly while ensuring Sarah and Emma were protected from legal or financial repercussions. He remembered the recording device he'd used at the fundraiser. It had captured several damning conversations, including Wallace's dismissive comments about children's health care. Those recordings, combined with evidence of Wallace's paternity, might be enough to force the senator's hand, but he needed more. Something irrefutable. Dominic spent hours searching through public records, finally finding what he needed: a sealed family court case from 8 years ago. The records weren't accessible online, but their existence was noted in the county clerk's database. He would need to find a way to obtain those records. And he would need DNA evidence connecting Wallace to Emma, something that could be verified. Independently, as dawn broke, Dominic finalized his revised plan. He would gather conclusive evidence of Wallace's paternity, document the senator's knowledge and deliberate abandonment of his daughter, and create a complete package that would give Wallace only one viable option: to acknowledge Emma publicly and make amends. The key was to structure the confrontation so that Wallace's political instincts would recognize that denial would be more damaging than admission, and to ensure that Sarah and Emma were insulated from any legal or financial repercussions. It was a delicate balance, requiring precision and timing, but if successful, it would accomplish far more than his original plan of simple financial redistribution. Dominic closed his laptop and lay back on the hotel bed, exhausted but resolute. This would be his most complex con yet, not for financial gain, but for justice. For Emma, for Lucia, He thought of Emma's innocent face as she'd shown him the photo of Wallace, her voice matter of fact as she described her father's absence. She deserved to know her father, to have his support and acknowledgement. And Wallace deserved to face the consequences of his abandonment. His phone buzzed with a news alert. Senator Wallace addresses Healthcare Innovation Summit, announces new pediatric research initiative. The attached photo showed Wallace at a podium, surrounded by pharmaceutical executives and hospital administrators, all smiling as they announced a program that would do nothing for children like Emma, who needed help now. Dominic's resolve hardened. The plan was set. Now he needed to execute it flawlessly. Sarah sat beside Emma's bed, watching as medical staff prepared her for the T-cell collection procedure. Emma clutched Mr. Buttons tightly, trying to be brave as nurses explained what would happen. "It won't hurt much," the nurse assured her. "And after we collect the cells, you'll get to rest for a few days while we make them super strong." Emma nodded solemnly. "Then they'll come back and fight the bad cells." "Exactly right." Sarah squeezed Emma's hand, overwhelmed by the sudden turn in their fortunes. After years of fighting insurance companies and hospital billing departments, after countless denied claims and payment plans, a miracle had appeared from nowhere. She thought of Dominic's visit yesterday, and her suspicions about his connection to the anonymous donation. There was something in his eyes when he looked at Emma, something personal and wounded. And his reaction when Emma revealed Wallace was her father. Sarah couldn't quite decipher it, but it wasn't simple surprise. "Mom, will you stay the whole time?" Emma's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Of course, sweetie. I took the day off. It would mean a tighter budget next month, but some moments couldn't be missed. Can Dominic come see me later? I want to show him my new watercolor painting." "I'll text him, but he might be busy." Sarah smoothed Emma's hair. "You've grown quite attached to him. He understands about being sick, and he doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby." Emma adjusted Mr. Buttons on her pillow. "Plus, he needs to finish his park drawing." Sarah made a mental note to text Dominic later. Despite her lingering questions about his sudden appearance in their lives, his visits clearly brightened Emma's days. And now, with treatment finally underway, every bit of positivity helped Dot as the medical team began the procedure. Sarah's phone buzzed with a news notification. She opened it to find Senator Wallace's face filling the screen as he announced a new pediatric research initiative. She quickly closed the app, her stomach churning with familiar anger. James Wallace, publicly championing children's health while his own daughter fought for her life without his support or acknowledgement. For years, Sarah had honored their agreement, protecting Wallace's reputation at the expense of her own peace of mind. She'd kept his identity secret, struggled alone, never asked for additional help even when Emma's condition worsened. But watching him posture on television, claiming concern for children's welfare, tested her resolve. What would happen if people knew? If his constituents discovered that their family values senator had abandoned his sick child? Sarah pushed the thought away. She had signed legal documents. Breaking them would risk everything: the treatment Emma was finally receiving, their financial stability, perhaps even custody if Wallace decided to retaliate with his considerable resources. No. She would continue to protect Emma the only way. She knew how, by staying silent, by working endless shifts, by being both mother and father to the daughter he had chosen to forget. But as she watched Emma brave yet another procedure, Sarah couldn't help wondering if her silence had become complicity in a deeper injustice. Detective Reed studied the hospital donation records with growing interest. The timing and amount matched the stolen funds too perfectly to be coincidence. But why would a thief target Wallace's fundraiser specifically, then donate the proceeds to the Children's Hospital, where Wallace served as board chairman? It suggested a message or a vendetta. "Sir," his assistant interrupted, "we've got something from facial recognition. Partial match on the suspect." Rage examined the file. Dominic Vega, 31, with a juvenile record sealed at 18, no adult arrests, but flagged in a FBI database of suspected confidence operators. Known aliases: Flexible appearance, suspected of involvement in at least 7 major financial schemes across 5 states. Never arrested, never charged. Witnesses often reluctant to pursue cases. A professional, then. But one with an unusually specific target this time. Find me any connection between Vega and Wallace, Reed instructed. And get me everything you can on Emma Taylor, the patient specified in the hospital donation. The pieces were beginning to connect, forming a pattern that suggested this was far more than a simple theft. It was personal, calculated, and potentially explosive. Given Wallace's high-profile Reed had a feeling they were just scratching the surface of a much more complicated story. Dominic sat in his rental car outside Sarah Taylor's apartment building, waiting. According to her text with Emma, she would be home for a few hours to shower and change clothes before returning to the hospital. It wasn't ideal to approach her at home, but he needed private conversation for what came next. When Sarah's battered Honda pulled into the parking lot, Dominic got out of his car and walked toward her. She looked surprised, then concerned. Dominic, what are you doing here? How did you know where I live? I need to talk to you, he said. It's important. About Emma and Wallace. Sarah's face paled. She glanced around the parking lot. Not out here. Her apartment was small but meticulously neat, the home of someone who fought chaos with rigid order. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. A calendar on the wall was crammed with work shifts and medical appointments. I only have 30 minutes before I need to get back to Emma, Sarah said, arms crossed defensively. What's this about? Dominic chose his words carefully. I believe Senator Wallace should acknowledge Emma publicly and provide for her care. I want to help make that happen. Sarah stared at him. Who are you, really? Someone who understands what it's like to lose a sister to a broken healthcare system. Someone who knows that men like Wallace should face consequences for their actions. This is crazy. You can't just show up and insert yourself into our lives. I signed an agreement. You signed it? I didn't. Dominic leaned forward. Wallace is a public figure who campaigns on family values while abandoning his own child. That's hypocrisy that deserves exposure. Sarah sank onto the couch. I can't risk Emma's treatment. I can't risk a lawsuit I can't afford to fight. That's why I'm here. To find a way that protects you and Emma while holding Wallace accountable, Dominic sat across from her. But I need to understand everything first. The full history. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying him. Why you care so much? What's your stake in this? My sister died because people like Wallace decided her life wasn't worth covering essential treatment. Because the system is designed to protect profits, not patients. His voice remained steady, but his eyes revealed the pain beneath. Emma reminds me of Lucia. I couldn't save my sister, but maybe I can help yours. Something in his sincerity reached Sarah. She sighed deeply. I met James at a campaign event 9 years ago. I was catering. He was the rising star candidate. We had a brief relationship 3 months. When I told him I was pregnant, he ended things immediately. Sarah's voice was flat, reciting painful facts with practiced detachment. His team arranged. The agreement. $50,000 in ironclad confidentiality in exchange for my silence and agreement never to seek additional support. Did you have legal representation? A court-appointed lawyer who advised me to take the deal. Sad fighting would be expensive in public with no guarantee of winning. Sarah's laugh was bitter. I was 23, scared, and alone. I took the money, had Emma, and tried to build a life. And Wallace has had no contact since. None. When Emma was diagnosed, I tried to reach him, thought surely he'd want to know his daughter was seriously ill. His lawyer called back, reminded me of the NDA, and threatened legal action if I persisted. Sarah's composure cracked. His own child was fighting for her life, and all he cared about was protecting his image. Dominic absorbed this, anger simmering. Beneath his calm exterior, do you have documentation? The agreement, communications, anything proving paternity? Sarah hesitated, then went to a small fireproof box in the closet. She returned with a manila envelope. The original agreement. And this, she handed him a folded paper, a DN, a test result I had done privately when Emma was a baby. I wanted proof, just in case something happened to me. So Emma would know her history. Dominic examined the paternity test. It was conclusive 99.9% probability that James Wallace was Emma's biological father. I kept everything, Sarah continued, her voice strengthening. Every letter from his lawyers. The original check. Even saved voicemails on an old phone. May I see it all? Dominic asked. I won't take anything. Just need to understand what we're working with. For the next 20 minutes, Sarah showed him the documentation of Wallace's systematic abandonment of his daughter. Legal threats when she'd reached out after Emma's diagnosis. Form letters rejecting her appeals for help with medical bills. A notification that any further contact would result in litigation. He's built his career on this image of moral leadership, Sarah said, returning the documents to their box. All while knowing his daughter was in a hospital fighting cancer. Sometimes I see him on TV visiting children's wards for photo ops, and I want to scream. Dominic thought of Wallace at the fundraiser, champagne in hand, dismissing expanded children's coverage as government overreach. What would you want? He asked quietly, if consequences weren't an issue. If you could have anything from Wallace, what would it be? Sarah considered this. Acknowledgement. Not just financial support, but recognition. Emma deserves to know her father acknowledges her existence. And I want him to face the contradiction between his public positions and private actions. Would you be willing to help me make that happen? How? The NDA. Leave that to me. Dominic explained his thinking. We gather irrefutable evidence. Create a package that gives Wallace only one viable choice to acknowledge Emma voluntarily. Structure. It's so his political instincts recognize that denial would be more damaging than admission. Sarah looked skeptical. You think you can outmaneuver a 3-term senator and his legal team? I think the truth is a powerful weapon when used precisely. Dominic leaned forward. But I need your cooperation. Copies of these documents. Permission to record our conversations about Wallace. And most importantly, your trust. Why should I trust you? I barely know you. Because I'm the one who arranged Emma's treatment funding. Sarah went very still. What? The Second Chance Foundation. The anonymous donation. That was me. How? Where did you get that kind of money? Dominic held her gaze. From Wallace's fundraiser? I redirected donations meant for his campaign to a better cause, his daughter's treatment. Sarah stood abruptly. You're saying you stole. I'm saying I corrected an injustice. Those donors thought they were buying Wallace's support for policies that hurt children like Emma. I ensured their money actually helped the child instead. Sarah paced the small living room, processing this revelation. That's why you appeared at the hospital. Why you've been visiting Emma. This was all part of some ... scheme? It started that way, Dominic admitted. A simple redistribution. But meeting Emma changed things. Learning Wallace is her father changed everything. Sarah stopped pacing. The police are investigating the theft. It's been on the news. I know the risks. I accepted them the moment I decided to help Emma. Why? Why take such a risk for a child you don't know? Because 8 years ago I made a promise at my sister's grave that someday, somehow, I'd make the system that let her die pay. Dominic's voice remained steady, but emotion flickered in his eyes. Emma gave me a chance to keep that promise. Sarah sat down again, studying him with new understanding. You could go to prison. Worth it. If Emma gets the treatment she needs. If Wallace faces real consequences. A long silence stretched between them as Sarah weighed her options. Finally she spoke. I'll help you. For Emma. But I need your word that whatever happens, her treatment won't be jeopardized. You have it. Emma's welfare comes first in everything. Sarah nodded decisively and reopened the box of documents. Then let's make sure James Wallace can't hide from the truth any longer. For the next hour, they carefully copied key documents. Sarah recorded a detailed account of her history with Wallace, including his rejection when Emma became ill. She provided text messages she'd sent his chief of staff when desperate for help with medical. Bill's messages that had gone unanswered. As Sarah prepared to return to the hospital, she paused at the door. What happens next? I compile everything. Create a package that leaves Wallace no choice but acknowledgement. Dominic carefully placed the copies in his bag. When it's ready, I'll meet with him directly. He'll have security, staff, lawyers. I'll find a way. Dominic's confidence wasn't bravado. It was the certainty of someone who had navigated complex schemes for years. Trust me on this part. Sarah nodded, a new determination in her eyes. For 8 years, I've protected that man's reputation at the expense of my daughter's welfare. It's time that ended. As Dominic returned to his car, he felt the weight of this evolving mission. What had begun as a simple conceal from Wallace, help a sick child, had transformed into something far more complex and consequential. Success would mean justice, not just for Emma, but potentially for countless other children affected by Wallace's policies. Failure would mean prison. And Emma losing her chance at treatment. The stakes couldn't be higher. But for the first time in years, Dominic felt he was using his skills for their truest purpose. Senator Wallace's private office in the Hart Senate office building offered sweeping views of the Capitol dome. Dominic observed the space carefully. Awards lined the walls. Family photos displayed a perfect political family, and security cameras monitored from discreet corners. Senator Wallace will be with you shortly, Mr. Reeves, the aide said, using the false name Dominic had provided for this meeting. Can I offer you coffee? No, thank you. Dominic sat poised in a visitor's chair, a leather portfolio on his lap. His suit was impeccably tailored, his demeanor calm and professional, the appearance of a potential donor or policy consultant rather than a man planning confrontation. Getting this meeting had required careful maneuvering. An official campaign email address, created through careful digital manipulation, a substantial donation pledge, references to mutual connections and healthcare policy interests, all constructed to bypass the gatekeepers surrounding a senior senator. The door opened, and Senator James Wallace entered with the confident stride of a man accustomed to power. Up close, the resemblance to Emma was even more striking, the same shape of eyes, the same slight tilt of the head when curious. Mr. Reeves, apologies for keeping you waiting. Wallace extended his hand. My staff mentioned you have some innovative healthcare funding proposals. Dominic shook his hand firmly. Thank you for making time, Senator. And yes, I believe my proposal will be particularly relevant to your interests. Wallace settled behind his desk, the position of authority. So, Meridian Health Partners, your organization specializes in public-private initiatives. Not exactly. Dominic set his portfolio on the desk and retrieved a thumb drive. My name isn't David Reeves, and I'm here to discuss Emma Taylor. Wallace's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened imperceptibly on his chair arm. I'm afraid I don't recognize that name. Your daughter, Dominic continued calmly, currently receiving treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia at St. Catherine's Children's Hospital, where you serve as board chairman. A flicker of alarm crossed Wallace's face before his political mask reasserted itself. I believe there's been some misunderstanding. I have one son, Andrew, as any basic research would tell you. I've done considerably more than basic research. Senator, Dominic placed the thumb drive on the desk. This contains DNA test results confirming your paternity. Copies of the NDA you had Sarah Taylor sign 9 years ago. Records of your lawyers threatening her when she reached out after Emma's diagnosis. And recordings of several conversations documenting the entire history. Wallace's composure slipped momentarily. He reached for his desk phone. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. My security team will escort you out. Before you make that call, Dominic said evenly, you should know that sealed copies of all this evidence have been placed with attorneys, with instructions to release them to major news outlets if anything happens to me or if Emma's treatment is interrupted for any reason. Wallace's hand froze over the phone. His eyes narrowed, reassessing Dominic with the calculation of a career politician. Who are you? What do you want? My name is Dominic Viga. What I want is simple. For you to acknowledge your daughter publicly and ensure her ongoing medical care is fully funded. Recognition dawned in Wallace's eyes. You're the fundraiser thief. The one who took my donor's checks. I redirected funds to a more worthy cause, your daughter's cancer treatment. The treatment you refused to help with, despite your millions and your position on the hospital board. Wallace leaned back, a new wariness in his posture. You realize you're admitting to a federal crime? In a Senate office, no less. And you're admitting to abandoning your child while building a career on family values? Dominic countered. I've accepted the potential consequences of my actions. Have you? A tense silence filled the room. Wallace's political mind was visibly calculating angles, risks, potential damage control scenarios. What exactly are you proposing? He finally asked. Dominic opened his portfolio and slid a document across the desk. A simple agreement. You acknowledge Emma as your daughter. You establish a trust to cover all her medical expenses, present and future. You make a public statement about the importance of supporting children with cancer, citing your personal connection to the cause. Wallace scanned the document, his expression hardening. This would destroy everything I've built. It would require you to live up to the values you claim to represent, Dominic corrected. Your career might actually benefit from demonstrating personal growth and commitment to a child in need. You're incredibly naive about political reality, Wallace scoffed. My base would see this as a moral failing, more than they'd see abandoning. A sick child? Interesting moral calculation? Dominic leaned forward. The choice is simple. Acknowledge Emma voluntarily, on your terms, with a narrative you control, or have the truth emerge through media investigations you can't manage. Stood abruptly, pacing behind his desk. You're blackmailing a United States senator. I'm offering a path to redemption, Dominic countered. One that benefits your daughter, who deserves her father's recognition. Wallace stopped pacing, his political mask slipping to reveal naked calculation. What if I offered you money instead? To walk away? Destroy the evidence? Then you fundamentally misunderstood my motivation. Dominic remained seated, calm in the face of Wallace's agitation. This isn't about money. Everyone has a price. My sister died from the same cancer Emma is fighting, Dominic said quietly. She died because people like you decided treatment was too expensive to cover. There's no amount of money that changes that reality. Something in Dominic's tone gave. Wallace paused. He studied the younger man with new awareness, perhaps recognizing the depth of his resolve. Let's say, hypothetically, I considered your proposal, Wallace said carefully. What guarantees would I have that additional demands wouldn't follow, that this situation would be resolved permanently? The agreement includes mutual non-disclosure regarding how this recognition came about. Sarah would be prohibited from discussing the NDA or prior arrangement. Your acknowledgement of Emma would be framed as a recent discovery, followed by your immediate embrace of responsibility. Wallace returned to his seat, political instincts engaging. The optics would be challenging, but potentially manageable with the right narrative. He tapped his fingers on the desk. I'd need time to consult my team, prepare a strategy. You have 48 hours, Dominic stated. After that, I can't guarantee the information remains private. That's not enough time to... It's more than enough time to decide whether to do the right thing for your daughter. Dominic stood, maintaining eye contact. Emma's a remarkable child, by the way. Talented artist, brave beyond her years. She keeps your photo under her pillow. Something flickered in Wallace's eyes, discomfort, perhaps even shame. It vanished quickly behind practiced indifference. I'll have my chief of staff contact you tomorrow, Wallace said, neither agreeing nor refusing. Leave your information with my aide. I'm staying at the Madison Hotel, room 712, Dominic replied. I trust you'll make the right decision, Senator, for Emma's sake. As Dominic reached the door, Wallace spoke again. Mr. Vega, the Capitol Police, and FBI are investigating the fundraiser theft. They'll connect the dots eventually. Probably, Dominic acknowledged. Another factor in your 48-hour timeline. He walked out of the office, past the curious aide, and into the marble hallway. The first move had been made. Now Wallace would either rise to the moral challenge or retreat into self-protection. Either way, Dominic had ensured Emma's story would no longer remain hidden. The truth had been spoken aloud in Wallace's own office, impossible to unhear, or completely bury again. It was a start. Wallace remained motionless at his desk, long after Dominic left. The thumb drive sitting before him like a live grenade. In 30 years of politics, he'd navigated countless crises scandals, opposition research, media attacks, but this was different. This was personal in a way nothing else had been. His intercom buzzed. "Senator, your 4 o'clock is waiting." "Cancel it," Wallace replied. "Cancel everything today. Tell Diane I need to see her immediately." When his chief of staff entered minutes later, she found Wallace staring out the window, uncharacteristically silent. "James?" "What's happened?" Wallace turned, his political mask momentarily absent. "We have a situation. Close the door." For the next 20 minutes, he outlined the confrontation with Dominic Vega, the evidence presented, and the ultimatum delivered. Diane listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly grave. "Is it true?" she finally asked. "Is this child yours?" Wallace's silence was answer enough. "Jesus, James," Diane paced the office. "An illegitimate child is manageable. An illegitimate child with cancer that you've ignored while chairing a children's hospital board that's potentially career-ending. I need options, Diane, not commentary." She stopped pacing. "We need to verify the evidence first. Determine if his dead man's switch threat is credible. And if it is, then we evaluate the least damaging path forward." Diane's mind was already working through scenarios. A controlled revelation is always better than an exposed scandal. "We could frame it as a recent discovery of paternity. The DNA test is." "From years ago?" Wallace interrupted. "And there's documentation of Sarah reaching out when the child was diagnosed." Diane winced. "That complicates things." She sat across from him. "Who else knows about this? Your wife?" "No one." "Margaret doesn't." "No, Andrew doesn't know." Wallace ran a hand over his face. "It was before my Senate campaign. Clean break, financial settlement, ironclad NDA. It was supposed to be resolved permanently." "Nothing in politics is ever resolved permanently." Diane's voice was gentle but firm. "We need to contact our crisis management team. And you need to talk to Margaret before this goes any further." Wallace nodded wearily. "Set up a secure meeting with the team for tonight." "I'll talk to Margaret when I get home." After Diane left, Wallace inserted the thumb drive into his computer. For the next hour, he reviewed its contents with growing dismay. The evidence was comprehensive and damning DNA test results. The original NDA with his signature, emails from his lawyers threatening Sarah when she'd reached out about Emma's diagnosis, even hospital bills showing treatments his daughter had needed but couldn't afford. Most disturbing were photos of Emma in a hospital bed, attached to IVS, drawing pictures with a nurse, holding a teddy bear with one missing eye. She had his eyes, his mother's smile. A child he'd never met, fighting for her life in the very hospital where he served as chairman. The political calculations were dire. His career had been built on family values rhetoric. He'd publicly championed policies that prioritized parental responsibility and opposed expanded healthcare coverage as government overreach. The hypocrisy would be impossible to explain. Away, yet acknowledging Emma would upend his family, shock his constituents, and potentially derail his presidential aspirations. Margaret would be humiliated. Andrew would feel betrayed. Donors would question his judgment. Wallace closed the files and removed the thumb drive. He had 48 hours to decide between political survival and moral redemption. Between the career he'd spent decades building and the daughter he'd spent years denying, That evening, in the kitchen of their Georgetown home, Wallace watched his wife of 30 years arrange flowers in a crystal vase. Margaret Wallace was the perfect political spouse, intelligent, gracious, tireless in her support of his career. Their marriage had weathered campaigns, Washington scandals, and the pressures of public life. He was about to test its foundations as never before. Margaret, we need to talk. She looked up, noting his serious expression. What is it, James? There's something I've never told you. Something from before my Senate campaign. As Wallace confessed the brief affair, the child, the NDA, and now the blackmail threat, Margaret's face transformed from shock to hurt to cold anger. 9 years, she said when he finished. You've lied to me for 9 years? I thought it was handled, resolved. A child is not a problem to be handled, James. Margaret's voice was ice. A child with cancer, no less. Your child. Wallace had no response. Put that way, his actions seemed indefensible. Does Andrew know? She asked. No one knows. Except the mother, my old campaign team, and now this blackmailer. Margaret sucked down her pruning shears with deliberate care. And what do you intend to do? I don't know yet. My team is evaluating. Options. Your team. Margaret's laugh was brittle. Always political calculations, never moral ones. That's not fair. Fair. She fixed him with a stare that made him flinch. There's a child in a hospital fighting cancer without her father's. Support or acknowledgement? Don't speak to me of fairness, James. Margaret walked to the window, arms crossed protectively. I've stood by you through everything, defended you, believed in you. I never thought I'd have to defend you from yourself. Margaret, I want to. See her, she interrupted. This child, Emma. Wallace blinked in surprise. That's not advisable before we have a strategy. I'm not asking for political advice. Her voice was steel. I'm telling you that I'm going to see your daughter. Tomorrow, with or without you. He recognized her resolve, the same quiet determination that had made her such an effective partner in his political rise. It would be complicated, he protested weakly. The hospital, the mother, the potential publicity. Life is complicated, James. But some choices are simple. Margaret turned to face him fully. You can join me tomorrow and begin to make this right, or you can continue hiding behind NDAs. And lawyers, but understand this, if you choose the latter, you'll be doing it without my support. The ultimatum hung in the air between them, a line drawn by the woman who knew him better than anyone. Wallace recognized the crossroads before him. Continue the path of denial that had protected his career, but compromised his character. Or acknowledge the truth and face unknown consequences. I'll make arrangements, he finally said. A private visit, controlled environment. Margaret nodded once, her expression softening slightly. It's a start. Later, alone in his study, Wallace called his campaign manager. Jack, I need you to clear my schedule tomorrow afternoon and prepare a preliminary statement acknowledging a personal matter involving family. What kind of personal matter? Jack asked warily. The kind that changes everything, Wallace replied, looking at the photo of Emma on his computer screen. I'm going to meet my daughter. Across town, in his hotel room, Dominic received a text from an unknown number. Preliminary agreement to. Terms. Verification visit tomorrow. 2 p.m. St. Catherine's. Private entrance. Bring no one. He texted Sarah. It's happening. Wallace coming tomorrow at 2. Are you prepared? Her reply came moments later. As ready as I'll ever be. Will you be there? Dominic considered the risks. The police investigation was closing in. Detective Reed had left voicemails at 2 of his known aliases. Being at the hospital increased his exposure exponentially, but he needed to see this through. To witness the moment when Wallace faced the daughter he'd abandoned. I'll be there, he texted back. For Emma. As he set down his phone, Dominic wondered about his endgame. If Wallace acknowledged Emma, the mission would be accomplished, but the consequences of his actions would remain. The stolen checks, the fraudulent foundation, crimes that carried significant prison terms. For the first time, Dominic considered that justice for Emma might require his own freedom as payment, as it seemed a fair exchange. St. Catherine's administrative wing buzzed with nervous energy. A senator's visit typically meant publicity opportunities and donation announcements. But this visit was different and secretive, with strict instructions for privacy in Emma's room. Sarah straightened the colorful drawings on the walls, adjusted Emma's pillows, and tried to calm her racing heart. She hadn't told Emma about the impending visit, couldn't bear to build expectations that might be crushed if Wallace backed out. "Mom, you're fixing things that don't need fixing," Emma observed, looking up from her watercolor painting. "Are we having a special visitor?" Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair. "Maybe. We'll see." Emma studied her mother's face. "Is it about the special medicine? Is something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. The medicine is working just like it should." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Tired but good." Emma held up her painting, a bright garden scene with butterflies. "This is for Dominic when he visits again. Do you think he'll like it?" "He'll love it," Sarah assured her, throat tight with emotion. So much hung in the balance today. Her daughter's recognition, Wallace's acknowledgement, Dominic's freedom. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Nurse Elaine peeked in, her expression unusually serious. "Sarah, could I speak with you for a moment?" In the hallway, Elaine whispered, "Senator Wallace is here with his wife. They're in the administrative conference room asking to see Emma." Sarah's knees weakened. Despite the planning, the preparation, the confrontation had arrived with stunning swiftness. "He actually came," she murmured. "Do you want me to send them away?" Elaine asked protectively. "You don't have to do this." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "No, it's time Emma met her father, but I need to speak with them first, alone." "I'll stay with Emma," Elaine promised. "Take all the time you need." The conference room felt impossibly small with Wallace's presence filling it. He sat rigidly beside a dignified woman Sarah recognized as Margaret Wallace. Neither spoke as Sarah entered. "Thank you for coming," Sarah began, her voice steadier. Then she expected double quotes Miss Taylor. Wallace nodded stiffly. "This is my wife, Margaret." Margaret Wallace extended her hand with surprising warmth. "Sarah, thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Sarah shook her hand, then sat across from them. "I should be clear, Emma doesn't know who you are. She doesn't know you're her father. She's seen you on television, but thinks you're just a senator." Wallace nodded, his political mask firmly in place. "Understandable." "Before you meet her, I need to know your intentions," Sarah continued. "Emma has been through enough. I won't let her be used for a photo op or political damage control." "That's not why we're here," Margaret said firmly, glancing at her husband. "We're here because it's long overdue." Wallace cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the proposal from Mr. Vega. I'm prepared to acknowledge Emma publicly, establish the medical trust, and ensure her ongoing care." "Just like that?" Sarah couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. After 8 years of denial and legal threats. "The circumstances have changed," Wallace replied carefully. "You mean you got caught?" Sarah leaned forward. "Let me be absolutely clear. This isn't about money. This is about Emma knowing her father acknowledges her existence. This is about you facing the consequences of your choices." "I understand your anger." "No, you don't." Sarah's voice trembled. "You don't understand working 3 jobs to pay for treatments. You don't understand holding your child through night fevers and wondering if she'll see morning. You don't understand explaining to a 5-year-old why her father doesn't want to know her." Margaret reached over and placed her hand on Sarah's. "You're right. We don't understand. We can't. But we're here now." Something in the older woman's sincerity reached Sarah. She saw in Margaret's eyes not political calculation, but human compassion. "Emma is extraordinary," Sarah said softly. "Despite everything, she's remained kind, creative, hopeful. She deserves better than she's received." "I'd like the chance to see that for myself," Wallace said, his voice less certain than before. Sarah studied him, the man whose den Emma carried, whose features were reflected in her daughter's face. The man who had threatened legal action rather than acknowledge his child's existence. I'm doing this for Emma, she finally said. Not for you. Not for any agreement. If at any point I feel this is harming her, it ends immediately. Understood. Both Wallaces nodded. Wait here, Sarah instructed. I need to prepare her first. Emma looked up as her mother returned, immediately sensing something important was happening. Emma, sweetheart, Sarah began carefully, sitting beside her. Remember how we've talked about your dad? How he wasn't able to be part of our family. Emma nodded solemnly. Because he had an important job and wasn't ready to be a father, Sarah took a deep breath. Well, your father is here today. He'd like to meet you. Emma's eyes widened. My real dad? Here? Yes. And his wife your stepmother? Emma clutched Mr. Buttons tighter. Why now? Such a simple question with such a complicated answer. Sarah chose her words carefully. He's realized he made a mistake by not knowing you. He wants to change that. Emma considered this with the direct logic of children. Is it because I'm sick? Partly, Sarah admitted, but also because it's the right thing to do. Will he like me? Emma's voice had gone small. Sarah pulled her daughter into a gentle hug. Sweetheart, anyone who knows you loves you. That's just how amazing you are. Emma nodded against her shoulder, then pulled back with sudden urgency. Wait, I need to fix my hair. And put on my good pajamas. Sarah laughed despite her tension. You look perfect just as you are, but we can brush your hair if you want. 5 minutes later, Emma sat up straight in bed, hair neatly brushed, wearing her favorite star-patterned hospital pajamas. Mr. Buttons was positioned carefully beside her, and her recent artwork was arranged on the bedside table. I'm ready, she announced with all the dignity an 8-year-old could muster. Sarah opened the door and nodded to the Wallaces waiting in the hallway. As they entered, she watched Emma's face carefully, prepared to intervene at any sign of distress. Recognition dawned in Emma's eyes as Wallace approached her bed. You're the senator from TV, she said. Looking between him and Sarah with confusion, Wallace stopped a few feet from the bed, uncharacteristically uncertain. Yes, I'm Senator Wallace. But I'm your father, Emma. Emma stared at him, processing this revelation. You're my dad? The one in my picture? Yes, Wallace confirmed, his political poise faltering under his daughter's direct gaze. Emma turned to Margaret. And you're my stepmom? Margaret smiled gently. I am. My name is Margaret. I'm very happy to meet you, Emma. Emma looked back at Wallace, studying him with the unfiltered scrutiny only children can manage. Why didn't you visit me before? I've been in the hospital a long time. The question hung in the air, its simplicity devastating in its directness. Sarah saw Wallace struggling for a politically acceptable answer and finding none. I made a mistake, he finally said, his voice rough with unexpected emotion. A big mistake. I should have been here long before now. Emma considered this. Mom says everyone makes mistakes, even big ones. Your mom is very wise, Margaret said softly. Do you want to see my drawings? Emma asked, changing subjects with the resilience of childhood. I'm really good at art. I'd love to, Wallace said, moving closer to the bed. For the next 20 minutes, Emma showed her artwork to the Wallaces, explaining each piece with enthusiastic detail. Sarah watched as the senator's stiff posture gradually relaxed, as Margaret asked thoughtful questions about Emma's creative process, as her daughter's natural charm worked its magic on these strangers who were family, when Emma proudly displayed a drawing of her dream family stick figures of herself, Sarah, and a faceless father figure. Sarah saw Wallace blink rapidly, turning away momentarily to compose himself. Emma, he said when he turned back, I have something important to tell you. I'm going to make sure you have all the medicine and care you need to get better. And I'd like to get to know you, if that's okay with you and your mom. Emma looked to Sarah, who nodded her permission. Okay, Emma agreed. But you have to learn to draw. I can teach you. And you have to be nice to my mom because she works really hard. I promise, Wallace said, the words carrying weight beyond the simple exchange with the child. As the visit concluded, Wallace hung back as Margaret and Emma continued talking about a book they both loved. Sarah, he said quietly, my office has prepared a statement acknowledging Emma as my daughter. It will be released tomorrow morning. The medical trust is already being established. And double quotes, he hesitated. I owe you an apology. For everything, Sarah met his gaze steadily. I don't need your apology. Just be the father Emma deserves from now on. Wallace nodded, glancing at his daughter, truly seeing her, perhaps for the first time. I'll try. As the Wallaces prepared to leave, Emma called out, Wait. I made this for my friend Dominic, but I can make him another one. She held out a watercolor painting of butterflies. So you can remember me until you visit again. Margaret accepted the artwork with genuine appreciation. It's beautiful, Emma. Thank you. In the doorway, Wallace paused, looking back at the child. He'd denied for 8 years. Something shifted in his expression. A realization, perhaps, of what he'd sacrificed for political expediency. Of the relationships that mattered more than power or position. I'll see you soon, Emma, he promised, his voice carrying a new resolve. After they left, Emma turned to Sarah with the forthright wisdom of children. He seemed sad. Is it because he missed so much time with us? Sarah sat beside her daughter, smoothing her hair. I think maybe it is. Well, Emma said pragmatically, he's here now. Better late than never, right? That's what you always say. Sarah smiled through sudden tears. Right, better late than never. Outside in the hospital corridor, neither noticed Detective Reed watching. From a distance, pieces of a complex puzzle finally coming together in his mind. The press conference stunned Washington. Senator James Wallace, standing with his wife Margaret beside him, acknowledged his 8-year-old daughter Emma, born from a relationship before his Senate campaign. For years, I've failed to live up to my responsibilities as a father, Wallace stated, his usual polish replaced by visible emotion. Today, I'm taking the first step toward rectifying that failure. Emma is courageously battling leukemia, and I intend to be by her side through that fight and beyond. Political analysts scrambled to assess the damage. Conservative supporters expressed dismay at the revelation of an out-of-wedlock child. Opposition researchers dug for additional scandals. But the narrative shifted dramatically when the press discovered Wallace had already established a substantial medical trust for pediatric cancer patients, with Emma as the first recipient. Perhaps the senator's personal connection will translate into policy changes, one commentator suggested. His healthcare innovation initiative is already being redirected toward actual treatment access rather than merely research. Inside Emma's hospital room, the television played the press conference while Emma continued her watercolor painting, occasionally glancing up at her father's image on screen. Is this why Dominic brought me art supplies? She asked Sarah, because he knew my dad was coming. Sarah chose her words carefully. Dominic cares about you. He wanted to help make things right. Where is he? He promised to finish his drawing. I'm sure he'll visit when he can, Sarah replied, though privately she worried. Dominic hadn't returned her texts since Wallace's visit. With the public acknowledgement complete, she feared he had disappeared, perhaps to avoid the legal consequences that might follow. Outside the hospital, Detective Reed watched the press conference on his phone, pieces clicking into place. The senator's sudden acknowledgement of a previously unknown daughter. The anonymous donation matching the amount stolen from Wallace's fundraiser. The timing of Dominic Viga's appearance in Washington. This wasn't just theft. It was an elaborate scheme targeting Wallace specifically. But why? What connected a career con man to a senator's secret child? Reed dialed his partner. I need everything we can find on Lucia Viga, presumably deceased. Likely childhood cancer, possibly leukemia. And check for any legislative connections. To Senator Wallace from approximately 15 years ago. 2 weeks passed. Emma's treatment progressed with promising results. Her energy improved, her blood count stabilized, and her doctor spoke cautiously of remission possibilities. Wallace visited regularly. Awkward at first, but gradually finding ways to connect with his daughter. He brought art books, listened, to her stories and even attempted drawing under her patient instruction. Margaret came too, bringing small gifts and a grandmotherly warmth. Emma had never known Sarah watch these visits with complicated emotions, gratitude for Emma's happiness, lingering resentment toward Wallace, and concern about Dominic's continued absence. Any word from your friend? Wallace asked one afternoon as Emma napped after treatment. Sarah shook her head. Nothing since your announcement. Wallace nodded thoughtfully. The police investigation is still active. They've connected the dots between the fundraiser theft and Emma's treatment funding. Will they arrest him? They're looking for him. Capitol Police. FBI. Wallace hesitated. I could potentially influence the situation, but you won't. Sarah finished, unsurprised. It's complicated. He committed serious crimes, regardless of motivation. Sarah studied the senator, the man who had denied his daughter for years but now sat devotedly at her bedside. People can do wrong things for right reasons. Some might say you're proof of that. Wallace had the grace to look discomforted. Touché. A knock at the door interrupted them. Nurse Eileen entered with Emma's medication. Senator, there's someone from your office here to see you. Says it's urgent. Wallace excused himself. In the hallway, Diane waited with a tense expression. The police have located Viga, she said without preamble. They're preparing to make an arrest tonight. Where is he? Still, in D.C. Apparently he's been monitoring Emma's progress from a distance. Diane studied her boss carefully. This is actually good timing for us. The arrest will shift media focus from your revelation to his crimes. We can position you as the victim of extortion rather than... Stop. Wallace raised his hand. No spin on this one, Diane. James, we need to manage the narrative. The narrative is that I abandoned my daughter for political convenience. Wallace interrupted. That's the truth. Viga forced me to face it, at great personal risk. He's a criminal, Diane reminded. Him, a con man with a long history of fraudulent schemes. Yes, Wallace acknowledged. And he did what I failed to do. He protected my daughter when she needed it most. Diane's expression registered surprise at this uncharacteristic sentiment from her pragmatic boss. What are you suggesting? She asked cautiously. Wallace thought of Emma's innocent question about Dominic's whereabouts. Her carefully saved drawing, waiting for his return. He thought of the medical trust that had given his daughter a fighting chance, funded with money that, ironically, would have gone toward his campaign to oppose expanded healthcare coverage. I'm suggesting we consider the complete picture before celebrating his arrest, Wallace said carefully. Now, I need to return to my daughter. In a small apartment across town, Dominic packed a light bag. His police scanner had picked up increased chatter. They'd traced one of his burner phones. It was time to disappear. He'd stayed longer. Was prudent, needing to confirm that Wallace had kept his word. The press conference had been surprisingly forthright. The medical trust had been established with proper legal protections. Emma's treatment was proceeding with the best care available. Mission accomplished. Justice served, at least partially. Now came the consequences. Dominic picked up the newspaper with Wallace's announcement. The photo showed the senator and his wife looking appropriately somber. The article mentioned Emma's improving condition and Wallace's new commitment to pediatric cancer initiatives. It didn't mention the years of denial and abandonment. The legal threats against Sarah. The hypocrisy of chairing a hospital board while refusing to acknowledge his daughter within its walls. But Emma was recognized now, supported. That was what mattered. Dominic tucked Lucia's photo into his pocket. We did it, Luz, he whispered. Not exactly how I planned, but we made a difference. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Police, open up. Dominic glanced at the fire escape through the window. He could run. He'd evaded capture before. But something had shifted inside him. The weight of years of running, of temporary identities and impermanent connections, suddenly felt heavier than the prospect of facing consequences. He opened the door to find Detective Reed and two uniformed officers, weapons drawn. Dominic Viga, Reed announced. You're under arrest for fraud. theft, and extortion. You have the right to remain silent. As the detective continued the Miranda warning, Dominic offered his wrists for the handcuffs, his expression calm. He had known this moment might come. I had accepted it as the potential price for Emma's chance at treatment and recognition. Just one question, he said as they led him away. How is Emma doing? Reed studied him with professional curiosity. The girl's responding well to treatment, from what I hear. Dominic nodded, satisfaction evident despite his circumstances. Good. That's good. In the police car, Dominic watched the city pass by, thinking of Emma's bright spirit and Wallace's reluctant transformation. Whatever happened next, however long his sentence might be, he had kept his promise to Lucia. He had made the system pay in its way. Some prices were worth paying. Emma's hospital room had transformed over the weeks. New drawings covered the walls. Cheerful flowers brightened the windowsill, and medical equipment had gradually been removed as her condition improved. She sat cross-legged on the bed, teaching Margaret how to blend watercolors, when Sarah entered. With the newspaper. Look who made the front page, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice light despite the headline. Fundraiser thief arrested in Wallace case. Emma took the paper, her eyes widening at the photo of Dominic in handcuffs. That's my friend. Why is he arrested? Sarah and Margaret exchanged glances. It's complicated, sweetie, Sarah began. But he's nice, Emma protested. He brings me art supplies and tells good stories. Before Sarah could respond, Wallace appeared in the doorway. His expression was grave as he nodded to his wife and Sarah. I need to speak with you both, he said quietly. Emma, I'll be back to see your painting in a few minutes, okay? In the family consultation room down the hall, Wallace closed the door. Viga's been arrested. Multiple charges, fraud, theft, extortion. I saw, Sarah said, her voice tight. What happens now? He'll be arraigned tomorrow. Given the evidence and the amount stolen, he's looking at a significant sentence. Margaret studied her husband. And how do you feel about that, James? Wallace paced the small room, conflicted. He committed serious crimes, but his actions directly benefited Emma and forced me to acknowledge a responsibility I'd shamefully avoided. He stopped pacing. Without his intervention, I might never have known my daughter. You'd have known her if you'd bothered to answer. My calls when she was diagnosed, Sarah pointed out, anger flaring. Or if you'd honored your basic obligation as her father from the beginning. You're right, Wallace acknowledged, the admission still awkward on his lips. I failed completely, and Viga held me accountable. That doesn't excuse his methods, but it does complicate the situation. Emma's asking about him, Margaret said. She doesn't understand why her friend is in trouble. The three adults fell silent, each contemplating the tangled ethics of the situation. What if I testified on his behalf? Sarah finally suggested. Explained how he helped when no one else would. Character testimony might help at sentencing, but the crimes themselves are clearly documented, Wallace replied. The prosecutors have a solid case. There must be something we can do, Margaret insisted, surprising both Sarah and Wallace. That young man may have used questionable methods, but he protected a child when the systems in place, including you, James failed her completely. Wallace looked at his wife with new appreciation. In their 30 years together, she had always supported his political ambitions. Now she was challenging him to consider something beyond political expedience. I could speak with the prosecutor, he said slowly, not to interfere with justice, but to provide context. Perhaps argue for leniency based on motive and outcome? Would that actually help? Sarah asked skeptically. It might. But it would also link me more publicly to the case, highlighting the very situation Viga was blackmailing me about. You mean it would require actual political courage? Sarah observed. Wallace winced but didn't disagree. I'll make some calls. The detention center's interview room was stark and functional. Dominic sat at the metal table, orange jumpsuit replacing. His usual careful attire. When the door opened to admit Senator Wallace, he showed no surprise. Conjugal visits are usually for spouses, Senator, Dominic remarked dryly. I don't think we qualify. Wallace sat across from him. I had to pull several strings to get this meeting. I'm flattered. Come to gloat. No. Wallace placed a folder on the table. I came to understand. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Understand what? Why you targeted me specifically. Why you donated the money to Emma's treatment rather than keeping it. Wallace opened the folder. Detective Reed was thorough. He found the connection. Lucia Vega, age 10, died of acute lymphoblastic leukemia 15 years ago after being denied experimental treatment coverage. Something flickered in Dominic's eyes pane, quickly masked. I was on the state insurance regulation committee then, Wallace continued. I voted against the coverage expansion that might have saved her. You remember that vote? Dominic asked quietly. No, Wallace admitted. It was one of countless votes. Insignificant to me, life-altering for families like yours. She died believing I could save her, Dominic said, his composure cracking slightly. I promised her she'd get better, that I'd find a way. I failed. Wallace nodded slowly. And you saw in Emma another child failed by the system. By me, the chairman of a children's hospital board refusing to acknowledge or support his own daughter's cancer treatment. Dominic's voice hardened. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Yes, Wallace. Agreed simply. It was. The admission hung between them, unexpected, disarming. What do you want, Senator? To thank you, Wallace replied. And to make you an offer. Dominic leaned back, skeptical. I'm listening. Emma's treatment is working. The doctors are cautiously optimistic about remission. She asks about you constantly, keeps withdrawing, waiting for your return. Wallace pushed the folder across the table. I've spoken with the prosecutor. Given the circumstances, they're willing to consider a plea arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Reduced charges. Minimum security. Contingent upon full restitution to the affected donors, of course. Dominic studied Wallace carefully. Why would you help me? I blackmailed you, exposed your secret, threatened your career. You also saved my daughter's life, Wallace said quietly, and forced me to confront the man I'd become, someone who valued political expedience over basic human decency. Over his own child. Quite a redemption arc you're crafting, Senator, Dominic observed. Good political narrative. Yes, Wallace acknowledged with unexpected candor. But also true. Sometimes self-interest and right action can align. Dominic considered the folder, but didn't open it. The donors have already been reimbursed from your personal accounts, according to the news. So this restitution would essentially be to you. Correct. I don't have that kind of money. I'm aware. Wallace leaned forward. That's where the second part of my proposal comes in. The Healthcare Innovation Initiative is being restructured into a legitimate foundation funding actual patient care. I need someone who understands the real gaps in the system, who recognizes when policies fail the most vulnerable. Someone with ... unorthodox problem-solving skills. Dominic couldn't hide his surprise. You're offering me a job? Eventually. After you serve a reduced sentence. The position would provide income allowing you to make restitution payments while doing meaningful work. Why would you trust me? I'm a conman, a thief. A thief who stole from the wealthy to help a sick child, Wallace countered. Your methods were criminal, but your objective was just. That suggests a moral compass, however unconventionally oriented. Dominic laughed without humor. My sister would appreciate the irony. Working for the man whose policies contributed to her death. Working to change those policies, Wallace corrected. To ensure other children don't face what Lucia did. What? Emma almost did. The mention of both girls' names in the same sentence struck something in Dominic. He finally opened the folder, reviewing the plea agreement. 5 years instead of 20, he noted. Still a significant price. Actions have consequences, Wallace said. Even well-intentioned ones. Dominic closed the folder. I want to see Emma before I go to prison. To say goodbye properly, explain. Or I'll be gone for a while. That can be arranged with appropriate supervision. And I want your public support for expanded pediatric coverage. Not just charitable band-aids, but systemic change. Actual legislation with your name on it. Wallace nodded. Already in progress. The Lucia Vega Children's Healthcare Act. Dominic looked up sharply. You're naming it after her? With your permission. It seemed fitting. For the first time in their exchanges, Dominic's carefully maintained facade cracked completely. He turned away briefly, composing himself. She would have liked that, he finally said. She wanted to be a doctor. Wallace stood, their negotiation complete. Consider the offer, Mr. Vega. Your attorney has the details. At the door, he paused. Whatever you decide, Emma will know what you did for her. That much I promise. After Wallace left, Dominic sat alone in the interview room, emotions he'd suppressed for years finally surfacing. He'd expected to pay a price for justice, had accepted it as necessary. But the possibility that his sacrifice might catalyze broader change, might prevent other families from suffering as his had, was unexpected redemption. Perhaps Lucia's legacy would extend beyond his personal vendetta, after all. Perhaps her light would shine through systemic darkness, illuminating a better path forward, that it wasn't the justice he'd imagined. It was potentially something more valuable. 6 months later, Emma Taylor raced across the hospital lobby, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. No longer a patient, she visited St. Catherine's now only for monthly checkups that confirmed her continued remission. Slow down, Em. Sarah called, hurrying behind her daughter. Wallace stood awkwardly behind his daughter, still learning how to navigate these intimate family moments after years of political performance. Sarah and Margaret flanked Emma, their initial tension having eased into a functioning partnership. For Emma's benefit. Thank you, Wallace said quietly to the headstone, for the second chance your brother gave my daughter. For the purpose your memory now gives my work. As they walked back to their cars, Emma skipping ahead with Margaret, Sarah found herself beside Wallace. She's going to be okay, she said, voicing the miracle she still sometimes couldn't believe. Yes, Wallace agreed. Thanks to a thief with more moral courage than I had. And thanks to a father who finally stepped up, Sarah added, surprising. Herself with the generosity of the acknowledgement. Wallace nodded, accepting both the criticism and forgiveness embedded in her words. Better late than never. That's what I always tell Emma. Sarah smiled. Better late than never. Ahead of them, Emma laughed at something Margaret said, her voice carrying on the afternoon breeze, the sound of a child unburdened by illness. Or abandonment, free to simply be. From separate paths, unlikely allies had converged to create this moment. A con man seeking justice. A politician forced toward redemption. A mother fighting for her child. Each transformed by their connection to one determined little girl who never stopped believing in possibilities. And somewhere, perhaps Lucius. Light continued to shine through the hospital wing bearing her name. Through the legislation fighting for children like her. Through her brother's sacrifice. And through Emma's second chance at life. Some stories don't end when justice is served. But when justice creates new beginnings. For Emma, for Wallace, for Sarah, and even for Dominic in his prison cell. This was not an ending but a transformation, imperfect, complicated, and infinitely more valuable than the false perfection of lives untested by moral challenge. If this story touched your heart, please comment, like, and subscribe to our channel, and share any similar experiences you've had with unexpected acts of redemption.